Welcome back to the channel Silent Ruptor, including 1680 chapter as recap. Enjoy. Littleton Manor. Martha and Gray were in a room conversing when Lucas stepped into the place. I still can't believe you called him over. Gray was still taken aback that his mother would call his father to come here, all because the portal merged when he stepped in. Just to be on a safer side. Martha chuckled. One of the reasons she called her husband over was because he was quite adept with spatial realms like this. Since he helped create the god's tomb they entered the last time, she felt with him around, there's a chance they might be able to get into the secret realm if Gray can't come out. Yes, the experts of the Littleton family were present, but she still felt it was safer if Lucas was present. Lucas looked at Gray and shook his head. You guys have only been gone a few days and you've already caused a commotion. Gray wore a wronged face. It's not my fault the portal reacted that way. I thought there would be something good in there. I didn't expect to come back empty-handed. You really came back empty-handed? Martha still found it hard to believe, even though Gray had told her 3 times already while they were alone. Yes, Mom, I didn't find anything that was useful to me. I fought a few beasts, but that was it. None of them were special or anything. Gray didn't show any signs of frustration, even though he had to tell his mother what he had previously told her. Maybe it reacted to you, not that there's anything special there, it just reacted due to what's in your body. Lucas speculated. Gray had also thought about this possibility as well. He thought that there might be something connecting the orb in his body and the secret realm. People have been going into the secret realm for years now, and no one was able to cause such a reaction. Given the uniqueness and mystery of the orb, it's not out of place to say that it was the reason why the portals merged. Maybe the orb was too powerful for just one of the 3 created spaces, so all 3 had to merge for it to withstand the orb. These were just thoughts going through their heads though. None of them spoke about the orb, they just nodded in unison after Lucas's words. Will I still be able to learn their way of inscribing? Gray asked. This was the only thing he had in his head right now. He originally came here for the sake of learning their way of inscribing, and after seeing it in action, he was fascinated by it and wanted to start training on it already, but who would have thought that his grandfather would first want to test his strength before sending him into a secret realm that will cause such a commotion? The elders are clearly still holding a grudge against his mother, which in turn made them not have a good opinion of him. Some of the elders wouldn't mind killing him there and then. This is something he's all too aware of. These elders will not think twice about killing the son of someone they see as an outcast of the family. In truth, the main reason they were still reserved might just be his father, Lucas Dawson. The fear of having an enraged powerhouse waiting to kill you isn't something any of the elders would want. Even the top experts who were in seclusion in the Littleton family wouldn't want Lucas Dawson to attack their family. They'd rather stay clear of him than try to pick a fight with him. Gray noticed how all the elders acted, especially the ones who didn't like his mother. Although they were not happy with Gray's words, none of them showed killing intent. They showed annoyance with his words, and some of them wanted to discipline him, but none of them had the thought of ever trying to take his life, at least not in a place like that where their identity would be exposed. Father will teach you, you don't have to worry about that. The elders will crawl back to their caves since they know there's nothing they can get from you now. Martha softly caressed Gray's face. Gray didn't mind his mother treating him like a child, and hearing that he will still be able to learn this way of inscribing made him happier. The trio started speaking of other things. Littleton family hall. The other elders were gone, leaving only the family head and Elder Wigbert. This is unacceptable. You know there's no way the kid didn't take anything. Why are you protecting him? Elder Wigbert still didn't understand the rationale behind the family head's decision. He's my grandson, and I do not think he's lying. The family head stated straightforwardly. I hope you will not regret the decision you've made today. Elder Wigbert disappeared with this statement. The family head didn't bother with Elder Wigbert's words, they had more important things at hand. A war is coming. This isn't the time to have internal strife. His eyes closed, almost to a slit as he ordered for Lucas, Martha, and Gray to be called over. Littleton family hall. 5 people could be seen present here. Gray's grandparents were sitting opposite them. Gray, I'll ask you in the presence of your parents, did you get anything from that place? Gray's grandfather asked calmly. He wanted to be sure, and with only the 5 of them there, he felt he made it safe enough for Gray to speak the truth. Gray bowed his head slightly to show his grandfather respect before he replied, I have already spoken to my mother about this as well, I did not get anything from the secret realm. Net. Gray's grandfather looked at Martha, who nodded her head. She asked Gray repeatedly, and the answer was the same. She even asked telepathically, and the answer was still the same. Void is the one who got something, not me. Yet I'm the one being interrogated. Gray couldn't help but feel envious of Void's current state. After absorbing a top-tier treasure, he went to sleep, leaving all the work for him to do. However, he knew to keep shut about Void acquiring such a treasure there. Gray's grandfather sighed, a bit disappointed that even with that commotion, Gray wasn't able to obtain anything from the secret realm. He thought Gray might have reached the criteria to make an inheritance appear in the secret realm, but from the looks of things, it might just be an accident or a mistake. The thought of taking Gray there once again flashed through his head, and after giving Gray and Martha a glance, he decided against it. You all know about the gnomes preparing for war soon, correct? He changed the topic.
All three nodded.
I'm thinking of meeting with those old guys. They are the ones with more experience when it comes to fighting against the gnomes. He continued, and given how they've been living a reclusive life all these years, I believe they will also have a lot of things from the ancient times they could pass on to the next generation. Lucas nodded and said, I've been trying to see an elder from one of the top faction back then that is still around, but he has denied me an audience every time. That's in line with their character, so I'm not surprised. Gray's grandfather didn't seem surprised by Lucas's words. His few living ancestors are the ones who those elders might be willing to see. Lucas might be just as strong as these old guys, but he's still not on their level. Uncle, how many of these ancient factions do you know are still standing? Lucas asked in a respectful manner. He knew about a few ancient factions, but he wasn't 100% certain that he knew all of them. Altogether, Gray's grandfather paused. He looked at Lucas, 18. Each one of these factions have shocking reserves, and I believe their all-out defense will be nothing short of breathtaking, literally. Lucas thought about the 12 ancient factions he stumbled upon and couldn't help but shake his head. There were still 6 he couldn't locate no matter how hard he tried. He continued to speak with Gray's grandfather about the visit and how they could get these ancient factions to prepare the younger generation for the upcoming war. Not like that, you have to ensure you have complete control of the elemental essence around you to ensure that the inscription comes out well. Gray's grandfather said, before showing Gray an example of what he was explaining to him again. It has been a day since Gray came out of the secret realm, and being the head of the Littleton family, Gray's grandfather was able to quell the elders who were agitated. Some of them were against him teaching Gray the family technique, but Gray was his grandson, making him part of the family, even if his mother rejected them. During the period Gray entered the secret realm, he bonded with his daughter, hence the reason he was a bit more soft-spoken when conversing with her. Lucas Dawson had left the Littleton manor. His father-in-law had guaranteed Gray's safety, so there was no point in staying there any longer. He had too much to prepare for, and even though all top families and factions had stopped their conflict over the arising war, it didn't mean they shouldn't guard against others. There are a few who wouldn't mind attacking them, especially when they notice he isn't around. Once the Dawson family has been dealt with, the other top families and factions wouldn't want to take out another top family over the dead Dawson family. This is something Lucas was all too aware of, and being the one holding down the fort, he couldn't be away for an extended period of time. Gray and his grandfather started their training the next morning after he left the secret realm, and it has only been a few hours, but his grandfather was in awe of Gray's speed. From the patterns he was seeing, Gray might be able to achieve their way of inscribing in a matter of days. He could tell that Gray already has a profound knowledge of arrays, and not just arrays, but also manipulating the essence around him. This was the main criteria if one wants to achieve their inscribing form. As he explained to Gray, small arrays appeared around his wrist, one on each one. He twisted his hand, and another one appeared over the first ones, a bit bigger, and after that, another one appeared, bigger than the previous one. All 3 arrays overlapped each other, giving it a certain beauty, but one could sense the danger from it. Gray's eyes shone with excitement as he saw this. Each overlapping array was empowering the previous one, which was a crazy concept. The increase in attack power in such a state will be massive. Amazing. Gray was like a little kid who got excited after seeing his favorite toy. He couldn't get his eyes off the arrays, and he even moved close to have a closer look at the array and feel it more. His grandfather didn't stop him, rather, he was quite intrigued at Gray's expression. He had been with Gray for a short period of time, and he could tell that there are few things that could move the calm mind of this young genius. Yet at the sight of these arrays, he could see joy and excitement in his eyes. He was someone who loved teaching, and from what he could tell, Gray was someone who loved learning. They were the perfect match. One was obsessed with learning new things, while the other was obsessed with teaching young geniuses. Both were willing to go to the extreme just to make sure they achieved what they wanted, be it teaching or learning. How could she have kept him away from me? He suddenly felt an urge to discipline Martha as he thought about how she had kept Gray away from him for so long. With such an individual, his life will no longer be boring. He had so much to teach, and he knew Gray had the water element, which made him perfect for the Littleton family. The thought of keeping Gray with him flashed through his head, but when he thought about what he knew about it, he threw the thought away. According to the information he gathered, Gray didn't grow up in the Dawson family. In fact, he was left to fend for himself by his parents for a long time, and he wasn't even in the main scenes of the Aurora continent. Gray only exploded to fame when he started conquering a few regions' top experts ranking while still in the origin plane. He even fought across planes, entering the Overlord plane rankings while still being in the origin plane. A lot of top factions and families tend to take notice of these things, so as to recruit young geniuses into their families or factions. But Gray's last name stopped any advances from them. At the time they were able to ascertain that he wasn't part of the Dawson family, he had already joined the Piermont faction. They all felt frustrated since he joined a top faction that was on the brink of disappearing. They hadn't gotten over that when they later found out he was the son of two of the brightest geniuses from the previous generation. Some families didn't feel too disappointed about this, since they couldn't bring the son of another top family into their family. However, a lot of top factions were dismayed at the missed opportunity. If they had seized the chance, they would have been able to create a relationship with the Dawson family, which is a plus. While Gray's grandfather was thinking about this, Gray was not only standing in front of him, but he even held one of his arms, and he was poking the arrays. It was as if he was trying to feel the array personally. Net. Such a strange kid. This was what was running through the head of Gray's grandfather as he saw him in the act. Gray inspected the arrays closer and a flash of inspiration came to him. He rushed back and attempted it once again, and this time, it was Gray's grandfather's turn to show excitement like that of a child. Before his eyes, Gray almost formed an array around one of his wrists, but it didn't complete the circle before it died down. This was a massive improvement. At this pace, it shouldn't take more than 2 days for Gray to learn the basics, and the moment he grasps it, he will not only be able to use it at will, but then he will be able to overlap it like he does. That will mean he could increase the attack power of his arrays. Having two forms of inscribing is one of the biggest abilities of the Littleton family. When they are in battle, others can't predict where an attack will come from, which gives them the edge. They could use the normal inscription, which could just appear behind the person, or use this type of inscription which increases the attack power. Not just that, they could use it to improve the strength of a normal elemental attack. An attack which was supposed to be a normal attack could be enhanced with this form of inscribing, making the outcome even fiercer. Martha and her mother, Gray's grandmother, were both watching the duo, and when they saw how Gray first showed that excited expression, followed by his continuous study of the array, before going back and attempting it, causing the same form of excitement from his grandfather, they almost burst out laughing. Apparently, the duo were cut from the same cloth, just that on the opposite sides. "I didn't think he'll have a lot in common with Dad," Martha commented, a bit taken aback. The grandfather and grandson duo were natural with each other, which came as a shock to them given how they've not really had any interaction prior to when Martha brought Gray over. He clearly enjoys learning new things. It's quite amusing seeing someone as strong as him given his young age being this excited over learning something new. Gray's grandmother said. Martha nodded. She already knew this about Gray during the time he was training with his father to merge the chaos energy and his essence energy. Gray is always willing to learn, which is the reason he has achieved everything he has today. Gray continued to attempt the array, getting occasional cheers from his grandfather, which was a funny sight to others. Both parties almost always have serious expressions on, yet in the face of learning and teaching, they were both showing excited faces. "I don't even think he was that happy when he saw us again." Martha couldn't help but think as she looked at Gray's excited face. Chapter 1682. The Geniuses of the Littleton Family. Previous chapter. Next chapter. The next day, Gray and his grandfather had been practicing all through the previous day. Given their cultivation stages, they didn't have any reasons to stop, especially with Gray almost close to achieving the inscription method. Martha and her mother didn't have anything important to do, so the duo stayed to watch them. Gray didn't know how many times he had tried it, or how many ways he had tried to manipulate the elemental essence around him. But he didn't stop. He tried after each failed attempt. He didn't show any signs of frustration even when things weren't going the way he wanted. He still didn't give up. He continued trying different methods to manipulate the elemental essence around him. During the process, he noticed that his control over each of his attacks were on the rise. He hasn't even tried to make any normal elemental attacks, but he could already sense the difference in his body. Just like before, Gray tried to create the array once again, around his arm, just below his wrist. The array started to form as he manipulated the essence around him in a certain manner. This was a bit different from normal arrays, but it wasn't too far from it. The array started to form. This time, the size and shape was perfect, and so was the manner in which it was being formed. It was obvious that Gray had improved a lot over the past day, and he didn't seem far from achieving it. The array formed, only this time, it didn't collapse like the previous times, rather, it stayed there. When Gray noticed that he had been able to keep the array stable, it was time for the next task, attacking with it. This wasn't the first time he had been able to fully form the array, but he has always been unable to unleash an attack with it. This time, he was hoping to be able to achieve this. From all the tweaks he has made, he believed that he should be able to properly use it to attack now. He tried to use a fire elemental attack since it was his favorite element. A snake made from flames appeared, around 3 meters long. When the snake appeared, its aura shook, but then the snake flew into the air, spitting out with a sea of flames that covered almost 100 meters radius. Gray burst out laughing like a madman. He has achieved it. He has created an attack with this new inscribing method. His grandfather was just as elated as he was. He couldn't help but also join Gray in a fit of laughter. One could see pride and excitement in his eyes. He couldn't wait to teach Gray something else. Martha and her mother were both shocked that Gray was able to learn the array in just a day. They knew just how hard it was for people who are regarded as geniuses to achieve this, yet it took Gray only a day. The fact that he was already a master in array formation couldn't be denied, but his speed and dedication when it came to learning is the reason he was able to achieve this in such a short time. The shortest time it took for anyone to learn it was a week, and that person is regarded as one of the greatest geniuses ever born into that Littleton family. And this genius was also a master in arrays before he started his training, yet it took him a week before he completed it. Gray on the other hand did it in a day. The difference was massive. Gray controlled the snake to fly back down. He was beyond himself with excitement. "Grandfather, I'd like to spar with the elders once again. This time, they should be stronger," he asked excitedly. The elders he fought the last time were in the 5th stage of the Sovereign Plane. While Gray was also in the 5th stage, he was able to defeat them cleanly, but he didn't feel like he used most of his strength. Now, he wanted to test out his newly acquired skill. He preferred honing his skill during battle. "I have the perfect person that'll fight with you." Gray's grandfather smiled. The fire snake disappeared as Gray collapsed the array. After some time, Gray's grandfather took him once again to the Littleton arena. This time, there were a few more people. Some elders were present, as well as a few people from the younger generation. Most of them were around Gray's age, while some were younger, and others older, but not by more than 5 years. However, with the exception of 5 people, the rest of them were in that venerable plane. Only one person Gray's age was in the Sovereign Plane, and she was only in the 1st stage. The others were in the 2nd and 3rd stages respectively, but they were all older than Gray was. When they saw Gray step on the platform, they couldn't help but stare at him intensely. After all, he did cause some commotion in the Littleton family 2 days ago. Not just that, he is the famous Gray Dawson, the genius whom even the gnomes wanted dead. The fact that the gnomes wanted him dead and even issued out such amazing rewards meant that he was special. And Gray's face alone was enough to make him the center of attention wherever he goes. He was that handsome. Some of the young ladies in the crowd looked at him with glowing eyes. Gray wasn't new to being stared at by everyone. He has been in too many competitions to care about how people looked at him. In some instances he barely even sees the faces of those in the crowd. The elder who stepped out was the one who took him to the hall when he just left the secret realm, a 7th stage sovereign. Gray was only in the 5th stage, so him wanting to fight against someone 2 stages above him seemed absurd to some of these geniuses. It's not that they hadn't fought across stages before, but that was while they were still in lower cultivation planes. The gap between each stage in the Sovereign Plane was huge, and closing the gap of one stage already shows that one is a genius. Going above 2 stages is just crazy, especially when it means who he's fighting is in the next major stages. A mid-stage sovereign battling a late-stage sovereign didn't seem like something they thought they'd see, especially one of such caliber. If Gray were fighting someone his age, the difference in experience wouldn't matter, but here, he not only has the disadvantage in cultivation level, but also in terms of battle experience. The young geniuses all started to converse about the upcoming battle. People tend to overestimate themselves when they've not suffered a huge loss. A young man said coldly. He was in the 3rd stage of the Sovereign Plane, and could be said to be the number 1 in this generation. Seeing Gray having a higher cultivation stage while being younger than he has made him a bit envious of him. I heard he defeated 2 elders on the same stage as himself a few days ago. I feel he has the right to battle against this elder. The young lady who was in the first stage of the Sovereign Plane spoke up. He won by fluke. The elders underestimated him, and they naturally paid for it, but it was all due to it not being a life or death battle. The young man said once again. He didn't believe that Gray would be able to defeat the 2 elders unless they were careless. This was the only explanation he thought made sense. The elders didn't underestimate him. Everyone here has heard of Gray Dawson and how he easily battles across stages. This should be the norm for him now, I fear. Another young man in the 3rd stage of the Sovereign Plane commented. He didn't have the same opinion as his brother. There's no point talking too much, we'll see it for ourselves here. A young lady in the 2nd stage stopped the others from arguing over if Gray would be victorious or not. They were watching him, so why argue when they could just wait and see? Gray and the elder stood across each other, each studying the other. Gray's grandfather looked at the duo, and after seeing that both parties were ready, he called for the start of the fight. Chapter 1683. Doesn't that mean he can one-shot me? Previous chapter. Next chapter. Gray bowed slightly to greet the elder and said, "Please." The elder nodded and attacked. He was a water elementalist, so multiple tentacles made from the water element appeared around him as he attacked. Gray was calm, seeing one of the tentacles coming his way. A fireball collided with it, turning it into mist. Another tentacle shot through the mist at breakneck speed, aiming straight for Gray's chest. The speed of the attack took Gray by surprise, but he was also prepared for something like this. The tentacle pierced through Gray's figure, and the eyes of the geniuses present widened. Even a few elders were taken aback at how easily it was for the elder's attack to hit Gray. But then they started to notice that something was wrong. There were no visible signs of pain in Gray's facial expression, and they noticed the elder who attacked entered a defensive stance the moment the tentacle pierced through Gray. Boom! An attack struck behind the elder, but he blocked it with an ice wall in time. The wall cracked and eventually crumbled, but he was able to stop the attack, which was his aim. The experts in the late stages of the Sovereign Plane noticed this from the start, but the geniuses in the early stages of the Sovereign Plane didn't sense any abnormalities until the attack rang off. They saw Gray's body, which they thought had been penetrated by the tentacle, start to fade away. An afterimage, one of the elders in the mid-stages exclaimed in shock. One has to know that for a person to create an afterimage, they have to be moving at a shocking speed. Gray's famously known for his space element, which they all expected him to use to dodge this attack. This was the reason some of them thought he had been struck, but they didn't expect that he was also very fast. Gray was already in a stage in his life where he didn't need to hide all his elements. He didn't even mind showing off 6 elements now, as long as he didn't show all 8 for now, he didn't have any issues. The battle quickly escalated. The first shots were just both parties testing each other out. Now, they were both going all out to attack the other. They were both moving at unimaginable speed, and those in the lower cultivation stages found it hard to keep up with them. Gray's grandfather and a few elders in the late stages of the Sovereign Plane had set up a barrier to ensure the aftereffects of the battles wouldn't affect those in lower cultivation stages. Gray mainly used his fire and lightning elements for attacks. The elder was a water elementalist, and his mastery was on the same level as Klouse. His defense was shocking. Even with Gray's massively overwhelming attacks, he wasn't able to break through this elder's defense. Boom, bang, bam, the elder and Gray exchanged multiple attacks, but not holding back. When the 2 elders who previously fought with Gray saw him unleashing such might, they couldn't help but thank their stars that he didn't use this much strength while fighting against them. After the elation came depression. The fact that Gray didn't need to go all out to fight them shows just how powerful he was, and how weak they were. The duo exchanged glances and they nodded to each other in understanding. It's not that we are weak, it's just that he's too strong. This was the conclusion the duo came to. Anyone in the 5th stage wouldn't be able to survive Gray's current onslaught of attacks, which shows just how frightening he was at the moment. Removing the fact that he was very close to becoming a 6th stage sovereign already when they fought, they didn't even mind saying he was a 6th stage sovereign when they fought. The young geniuses could barely believe their eyes. Even the ones who felt Gray had a shot against the elder were left speechless. Gray's strength was even more freakish than what they've heard. Gray and the elder were locked relentlessly in battle for a minute, and none of them has been able to get the better of the other party. They were still fighting as the mist in the arena got to a large extent. At first, Some of the elders thought it was just as a result of Gray's fire elemental attacks striking the elders' water elemental attacks, but then something happened that turned the entire battle on its head. An ice storm started to brew, and with the aid of the mist, the ice storm was very powerful, far stronger than what it used to be. Even Gray noticed the change, the temperature dropped exponentially, and he noticed that he couldn't even make use of this temperature. He also has the water element, so he should have been able to also take advantage of this to boost his water elemental attacks, but for some reason, he noticed he couldn't. I heard you also have the water element. I'll show you a special technique of the Littleton family that we've used to suppress every fire elementalist that we have fought against. These words rang in the arena, and the eyes of all the youngsters lit up. This was a legendary technique that required one having a domain to use. I wonder how he will be able to fight against this. Gray's grandfather muttered to himself. Gray naturally didn't panic when he saw this. It wasn't the first time he was fighting at a disadvantageous position. His eyes lit up with a blue glow, and flames burst out from his body. His fire domain has been brought forth. Half of the arena was covered with the silverish ice storm, while the other half was covered with bluish flames. It was a majestic sight, but that wasn't the end. Experience more content on mv.le-novelbin.net. In Gray's bluish half, red lightning arcs started to appear. Gray didn't only bring out his fire domain, but his lightning domain as well. When he brought out his fire domain, he noticed that the Elder's domain was dominant, hence he needed a balance breaker, and his lightning domain was the balance breaker. With Gray's lightning domain coming in play, everyone's eyes bulged out. A double domain. The shock of seeing a multi-elementalist use a double domain was massive. This isn't the first time a multi-elementalist was using multiple domains, but it was a rare sight to behold, hence the reason for all the shock. The Elder standing opposite Gray didn't expect his advantage wouldn't last more than a second. He wasn't even able to capitalize on it before Gray brought him back to reality. He let out a wry laugh. What type of freak is this? He wasn't the only one who had this question in his head, even the Elder Wigbert who was present was stunned. He already felt Gray was a freak when he didn't react even when under his pressure. Now seeing him use a double domain, simultaneously was the confirmation. Martha wasn't shocked Gray could use multiple domains. Her son has all elements. She would be ashamed if he wasn't able to use at least 4 domains. If she were to find out that Gray already has 4 domains, she would have been left speechless. The 3 domains countered each other out, and the Elder took the initiative once again to attack. Gray blocked the attack, with the aid of his earth element, before calling forth a lightning bolt that struck from the sky. The Elder was able to block it with an ice lotus, ensuring the attack didn't come close to him. Gray and the Elder started their back and forth once again. They were both attacking each other at a shocking speed. Each attack was powerful, enough to seriously injure the other party. This showed the others that even though they were sparring, both parties were using their full strength. The young man who felt the 2 elders didn't go all out against Gray found it impossible to believe that Gray could fight against a 7th stage sovereign while being a 5th stage sovereign to a stalemate. How? He noticed his hand shaking as he watched Gray and the Elder fighting against each other. He couldn't even withstand the aura of this Elder. He dared to take one of these attacks. He'll not survive it, he was certain. Doesn't that mean he can one-shot me? The second this thought came to his head, he refused to believe it. Since Gray could skip 2 stages, so could he. Chapter 1684. Still too young. Gray didn't know what was going through the minds of the young geniuses of the Littleton family. All he had in his mind right now was dealing with the Elder before him. He didn't even care about the others staring at him. He exploded out with a powerful flaming attack, but the Elder was able to easily deal with it, countering with ice spikes that shot at him. Gray's natural speed was frightening, when his figure was covered with red lightning. His visage gave off the view of a lightning god surrounded by beautiful blue flames. At this moment it dawned on everyone present, Gray's lightning was red too. He already has blue flames, a special type of flame in the fire element. Now, he also has red lightning, a special type of lightning in the lightning element. What sort of freak is this? Does he have to have everything? Even Gray's grandfather couldn't hide the hint of jealousy in his eyes. Of course not the bad type of jealousy, just one where you see someone close to you being favored by so many people, that although you're happy, you just can't help but ask, why always them? Gray's explosive speed was even faster now with the aid of the red lightning. This time, the Elder started to show signs of not being able to catch up to Gray's speed, which didn't come as a surprise to anyone. Gray was just too fast for his cultivation stage. Most of the Elders present, with the exception of those in the late stages that have 2 or more elements, specifically having a speed enhancement element like the wind, lightning, and light elements could say are faster than Gray. The rest won't be able to touch his clothes. Boom, bam, bang. The elder focused fully on defending. He couldn't keep up with Gray's speed, but given his defenses, he didn't believe Gray would be able to break through it. The elder was patient, carefully looking around, waiting to see if Gray would slip up. In battles like these, it almost always all ends up with the person who slips up first. If the elder makes a mistake, then Gray would be able to capitalize on it, and vice versa. As the time of the battle extended, the elders could only accept a certain fact. Gray's level of battle awareness was too scary for his age. He wasn't making any mistakes, and for someone his age, when battling with the older generation, they always tend to show those little lapses in concentration, especially when it looks like they have the advantage over their opponents. The battle was already getting close to 5 minutes now, and it was clear to see that none of them would be able to get the advantage. Unless one of them does something that will turn the tables, it's unlikely that this battle will have a winner. The thought of Gray fighting someone 2 stages above him in the sovereign plane and still being able to fight him to a point where there's no clear winner already says a lot about his talent. Just when they were waiting for the battle to get past its peak, Gray did something they didn't expect. An array appeared just below his right wrist, and with a twist of his right arm, a snake made from flames appeared. The strength of this snake was relatively stronger than Gray's previous attacks. The elder didn't expect the sudden increase in Gray's attack power and was caught off guard by this. Gray's attack finally rocked him, forcing him to take a step back. Seeing this, Gray didn't sit back. He felt this was the perfect opportunity to start an onslaught, and he did as he felt. From one strike to another, he was able to force the elder back, making it hard for him to catch his breath. An opportunity presented itself, and Gray's figure bolted straight for the chance. Seeing this, the elders all shook their heads. He's still too young. This was the thought in their heads. Even Gray's mother felt the same. It was easy to see that the elder was baiting Gray, and surprisingly, he took it. It couldn't be helped. The moment one has the momentum in such a battle, it's hard for them to want to relinquish. At the moment, it's a matter of if Gray's faster or if the elder would be able to stop Gray in his tracks. The outcome of the battle was decided at that moment. Just as Gray's figure was bolting straight for the elder, a smile appeared on the face of the elder as a large body of water appeared from beneath the arena ground. The plan was simple: slow Gray and attack now that he's open. When the body of water covered Gray, ice spikes appeared around him as the elder smiled and said, "I win." Gray looked at the elder and laughed out arrogantly, "Ha ha ha, I don't see you stopping me." To the shock of everyone present, Gray didn't halt his movements, rather, his speed increased. Crazy, arrogant fool. Some thought Gray was crazy, while others felt his talent had gotten to his head. Only a few could tell that Gray genuinely didn't believe that he had lost. The fire snake attacked the elder from behind, and the elder had no choice but to unleash his ice spikes. Given the distance and how he prepared, he didn't believe Gray would be able to block these ice spikes. Everyone held their breaths as they watched the ice spikes pierce through Gray's body. Seeing the attack pass through Gray's body, they thought it was him using an afterimage once again. Even the elder felt the same and prepared to counter Gray after blocking the attack of the fire snake. However, he noticed something odd. The supposed afterimage shot at him at breakneck speed. The fire snake was still behind him, and he didn't think about setting up any defenses against the afterimage coming towards him. Swoosh! The sound of a powerful gust of wind resonated in the arena as Gray paused in front of the elder. His fist was by the side of the head of the elder. It was clear that he missed it on purpose. The gust of wind that kicked up was the impact of Gray's fist striking the air. The elder held his breath as he felt the force behind that punch. He knew for a fact that if Gray's fist had connected with his head, he would 100% be dead from it. How? This was the question in the mouths of a lot of people. Only those above the 8th stage of the sovereign plane saw what he did perfectly. Impressive, Elder Wigbert complimented before disappearing. The young geniuses all looked at the elder confused. They didn't know how Gray was able to pass through the ice spikes which clearly passed through his body. It was evident to see that he wasn't injured, which meant that the ice spikes didn't harm him. So if they didn't harm him, does that mean the elder's attack was a fluke? Seeing the gazes of everyone placed on Gray and the confusion in the eyes of the younger generation, an elder in the 9th stage explained. Gray used his ability as a space elementalist to distort reality somewhat. It looks like he's there, but for a short moment, he was in a state where nothing can touch him. No attack will be able to hit him in such a state. Even with the elder's explanation, they still didn't understand how that was possible. Simply put, he phased through the attack. When they heard the simple terms, they were flabbergasted. Phasing through an attack? How could that be possible? Doesn't that make one invincible against others? Some of the youngsters felt that if Gray had made use of this ability at the start of the battle, he would have been able to defeat the elder sooner. The elder heard the other elder's words. He looked at Gray and shook his head in defeat. Interesting, I surrender. There's nothing else he could do. He had been defeated, which was a bit of a shock to him. When he found out two elders were beaten by Gray, he felt like they were a disgrace, but now that he had fought with him, he couldn't help but be impressed by the youth standing before him. Gray is indeed special. Chapter 1685 Increased Popularity. Thank you for letting me win. Gray bowed softly to the elder. Although his intentions were purely for the aim of using the new method of inscribing, he also wanted to test out his strength against someone of this level. Being able to use the inscribing method in such a situation was quite impressive, and he was pleased with his progress so far. All he has to do now is be able to overlap the arrays, making his attack power stronger. He didn't have any reason to stay on the arena any longer. Just as he was about to leave, the number one young genius from the Littleton family stepped on the platform. His sudden appearance caught everyone by surprise as they didn't expect anyone to step up to Gray, especially from the younger generation. Given Gray's current position, he had already grown past the stage of fighting against those around his age. Gray didn't stop his movements, even with the young man stepping on the platform. He didn't know who the young man was or why he jumped onto the platform, and to be honest, he didn't really care. Seeing this, the young man spoke up, Gray Dawson, I know I'm not on your level, but I too would like to experience the brilliance of someone touted as the greatest genius of our generation. Gray tilted his head to the side to look at the young man. I'm sorry, but I see no need. Since he's already there, Gray, spar with him. Gray's grandfather interrupted him as he was about to refuse the young man. The truth was, everyone present knew that the young man couldn't fight against Gray, but they could also see the determination in his eyes. It was evident that he didn't want to leave without seeing how he fares against Gray. When you say spar, do you mean exchange a few moves? Gray looked in the direction of his grandfather. He wasn't one who liked sparring casually any longer. If he were to use more than 50% of his strength against this guy, then the battle wouldn't even last a second. What do you think? Gray's grandfather turned to the young man. I would like him to show me his true strength. The young man bowed his head. You heard him. Gray's grandfather added, you can start whenever you two are ready. He knew that this wouldn't even be worth watching, unless Gray decides to go easy on his opponent to help him save face. The only way the battle will take long is if Gray doesn't have the intention of one-shotting his opponent. Gray nodded to his grandfather before turning to the young man. Let me know when you're ready. The young man gritted his teeth. He hated the fact that Gray was speaking to him as if he were part of the younger generation, when in truth, he was even older than Gray. This was an annoying feeling. He was usually the one who treated people in this manner, and not the other way round. He calmed himself and looked at Gray. With a deep breath he said, I'm ready. Just as he was about to explode out with his full strength, he saw Gray standing before him, his fist pausing in front of his face. If Gray moved an inch further, he would be able to obliterate the face of the young man. The energy which was surging in the body of the young man wavered, and like a deflated balloon, his previously increasing aura slipped out. He couldn't control it. He could feel his heart pounding, seemingly wanting to burst out of his chest. He was beaten, and not in a small manner. Gray completely showed him the massive gap between them. What was even more embarrassing is the fact that Gray didn't even use any elemental attacks. He just appeared in front of him with his fist pointed at his face, as if to say, I can kill you if I want to, but I won't. Thank you for letting me win. Gray bowed to his opponent. He looked around and added, if that's all, I'll take my leave. The young man was still standing on the platform as Gray walked away from the arena. He didn't bother to check on the young man as it wasn't the first time he was doing something like this. Over the years, he has encountered geniuses who felt like he wasn't superior to them, and to be honest, he didn't really care if he were or not, but whenever any of them tried to want to use him as their stepping stone, he didn't mind letting them know that they were not on the same level. Klouse, Alice, and Reynolds would all be able to one-shot this guy, much less Gray himself. Some people looked at the young man with pity. The young man's direct grandfather, one of the elders who was in the 8th stage of the sovereign plane, couldn't help but feel pity for his grandson. Over the years he has been very proud of his grandson's progress. Being the number one genius of his generation in the family was quite amazing. Unfortunately, sometimes, people need a reality check. The entire Littleton manor was abuzz due to the news of Gray. A 5th stage sovereign defeating a 7th stage sovereign. That wasn't the only news. The juiciest news was how he overwhelmed their number one genius of this generation from the Littleton family. Some of the youths who heard this didn't believe it, and some of them searched for Gray to spar with him, but none of them was able to locate Gray in the manor. They later found out he was training specifically with the family head. With Gray's sudden appearance in the Littleton family, some people would naturally want to know his connection with the family, as most of them didn't know who Gray's mother was. When she left the family, everyone stopped mentioning her, which made it hard for the younger generation to know who she was. This sparring session brought the question as to what Gray's relationship with the Littleton family was, and the information of who his mother was came to light. The legendary Gray Dawson, son of the famous Lucas Dawson, is also related to the powerful Littleton family, being the direct grandson of the Littleton family head. This news shook the entire Aurora continent. Gray's background was starting to be scarier and scarier. There were a few people from some top factions who already had reservations about him being from the Dawson family. Finding out that he's also closely related to the Littleton family made them feel depressed. They already couldn't afford to offend the Dawson family. Adding the Littleton family to this meant there was no way they would be able to even touch him, unless they want to be attacked by two of top families in the Aurora continent. They also shouldn't forget the fact that he is part of top faction too. Even though the Pyrmont faction is currently a shell of its former self, it was still a top faction, and they have very powerful experts hiding in the faction. Given Gray's talent, everyone affiliated with him wouldn't want any harm to come to him. They'd rather go to war with other factions and families. With all the news going around, Gray didn't know, since he was focused on improving his new skill. He spent another week training with his grandfather before feeling like it was time to leave. Gray hasn't been one to stay in one place, unless he's training, just like in this case. He has been here for over a week, and he has learned everything he came here for. At the moment, he could simultaneously use the array on both arms, which was a big improvement. Now all he has to learn is how to increase the number of arrays that will appear on his arm. This method of inscribing is better when he can overlap multiple arrays. Thinking about the new attack added to his arsenal, he couldn't help but feel grateful. There's also the fusion inscription he learned some time back. Gray left the Littleton manor with his mother. Void was still asleep somewhere in his spatial ring, and Gray hadn't heard from him since he entered the ring. They were returning to the Dawson manor, and Gray didn't have any plans of staying there. Moonlight faction. In a training hall made entirely of ice, Klouse could be seen sitting down on an ice futon. The hall was around 100 meters in length and width, and there was a small pond in the middle that gave off a bone-chilling cold aura. The temperature in this room was well within the freezing area. Not everyone from the Moonlight faction can use this training hall, and even the ones who could need to expend a lot of faction points to be able to afford it. Klouse was different, as he was given special rights. Not just him, there were a few more people from the younger generation who could use this place without restraint. Klouse wasn't shocked when he heard that Gray was also connected to the Littleton family. He had known from the technique Gray's mother used that she was also from a top family. The only thing that's irritating him at the moment is the fact that Gray defeated a 7th stage sovereign. Fuck it, I really want to do it too. Klouse was pumped up, but he knew the truth. There was no way it was possible for him to defeat a 7th stage sovereign with his current strength. If dared to fight against one, he would be beaten to stupor. An elder from the Moonlight faction who was also using the training hall saw Klause's moody expression, and just as she was about to speak, one of Klause's seniors in the faction, whom he had grown stronger than now, walked up to him and said with a mocking smile, "If I recall correctly, you said you can do whatever that friend of yours does. Well, I wonder if you'd like to spar with my teacher?" The young lady looked at Klouse with a cheeky smile. She was already at the peak of the venerable plane, but she knew that in the presence of geniuses like Klouse and his friends, no one would bat an eye in her direction. At the moment, Klouse is not only the number one genius in the Moonlight faction, but he's also regarded as the greatest genius to ever step foot into the faction. With his current strength, he doesn't need to be forced to train any longer, but of course, that doesn't stop the faction leader and some of the other top elders from forcing him to. They know that he was too lazy, and if left alone, he might not cultivate, hence the reason they still force him. This young lady's teacher was a 7th stage elder in the Moonlight faction, and so was the elder who was present there. Continue reading at MVL. Klouse looked at the young lady and snorted, "What does that have to do with you? Besides, unlike him, I like giving my absolute respect for my elders." Klause's defense didn't surprise the young lady. She was already used to the fact that Klouse was shamelessly shameless. He didn't care about his reputation or anything. He did whatever he wanted, and given how shameless he is, it's almost impossible to get the better of him. There's no harm in saying you can't do that, she said coolly. Klouse said courteously, like I said, I pay my respects to my elders. I don't try to show that I'm strong in their presence, because they are the ones who helped me get to the point I am at today. The elder who was present nodded her head, pleased with Klause's humble appearance. His next words, however, made her eyes twitch repeatedly. I'll catch up to all the elders very soon. I hope you have the guts to repeat these words then. Klouse said, still having a humble expression on his face. Klouse might be strong, but he's not as crazy as Gray was. However, if he were to fight against someone a stage above him, he didn't think his odds of winning were low. 2 stages above, however, especially when there's the gulf between the strength of a mid and late stage sovereign. The young lady burst out laughing when she heard this. I knew you were afraid. If only you were half the man Gray Dawson was, we would have been so proud of you. I wonder if we could recruit him instead and throw you away? She continued thoughtfully. From what she heard from her teacher, Gray was the one they initially invited to join the faction. Unfortunately, he refused to join them. They still feel a hint of regret that they weren't able to get Gray to join them, yet he somehow went ahead to join the Pyro faction. Hey you, why don't you try inviting him over? She suggested to Klouse. You're never going to see his shadow come close to this faction ever. Gray Dawson is here to see you. Someone announced from outside the training hall. Klouse was seated. Klouse almost bit his tongue when he heard the name Gray Dawson. What the hell is he doing here? Klouse almost screamed at the top of his lungs. The young lady who suggested for Klouse to invite Gray over was elated. She gave him a cheeky mocking chuckle as she asked, You were saying? Klouse snorted coldly, making the temperature in the hall drop even further, causing the young lady to laugh, placing one hand on her mouth as she laughed. She didn't forget to add, Tell him we wouldn't mind a trade. You're not that bad yourself, his faction will take you in. Klouse almost tripped when he heard this. She was saying it as if they were taking pity on him. He left the training hall and headed for his place. This wasn't the first time Gray was coming here to see Klouse, and given Gray's identity, he was welcomed here. Klouse place. Gray was seated as he waited for Klouse to come. What are you doing here? Klause's voice was heard outside before he even opened the door. Gray looked at him and said, Hello to you too, bud. Seeing Gray's face, Klouse sighed. Why did he have to come now? He thought to himself, I thought you went home? He asked as he took a seat. I was bored. I thought I'd pay you a visit on my way to the Pyro faction. Gray explained, Sometimes I forget that you are part of a faction. Your dad's name completely overshadows that part of your identity. Klouse commented. Gray joined the Pyro faction a while after they joined their respective factions, but just when Gray's name was starting to grow famous, the news of him being the son of Lucas Dawson came to light, and that completely eliminated the fact that he was also part of a faction in the heads of others. Adding his current relationship with the Littleton family to it now, no one would even remember the Pyro faction. If Gray hadn't spoken about it, Klouse himself had forgotten about it. The duo started speaking about what they've experienced the past few weeks they've been apart. Since leaving the gnome world, they hadn't really spent time together. All spending their time training, hoping to advance further in their cultivation. Did you hear about the gnomes wanting to start the war now? Gray asked. Klouse nodded, and his expression turned serious. Looks like the death of those princes didn't hold them back. If anything, it even agitated them, I fear. The Emperor is livid. I'll try to see how much chaos I can set up in their camp using the 7th prince and the other princes that are under my control. Gray replied. Since it seems like they can't stop them, then he was going to make life a living hell for the troops of the gnomes. With the 7th, 4th and 5th princes under his control, he could at least cause 1 or 2 havocs without fear. It's not like they would know that he's the one doing it. Klouse nodded and asked Gray about his mother and if she was willing to take up his offer. Gray rolled his eyes when he heard this question as the duo joked around. Gray didn't stay in the Moonlight faction for too long. He too needed to head back to his faction and focus on training. Chapter 1687, The Intermediate Stage. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Gray left the Moonlight faction and headed for the Pyro faction. If he wanted to see the others, he'd have to head in another direction, which would take longer than the time he wanted to travel back. He got to the Pyro faction a few days later. His status in the eyes of the elders of the Pyro faction had elevated to the very top. His background wasn't the reason for this, rather, it was his strength. Being able to defeat a 7th stage sovereign takes him to the very top in this world. Strength was all that mattered, and a 7th stage sovereign is strong enough to open a faction in the Aurora continent. Their faction might not be considered as one of the best mid-tier factions, but it would still be a force to be reckoned with, unless they have to deal with those of higher cultivation stages than their faction leader. The Pyrmont faction leader summoned Gray as soon as he knew of his arrival. The faction leader's cave. The Pyrmont faction leader took a glance at Gray, and he couldn't help but recall the first time he saw Gray, as at that time, he was only in the Overlord plane. In a matter of a few years, the youngster he thought would be great in the next 30 years or so, has indeed become great, but it didn't take that long, it was shorter than he could imagine. Would you like to take on a role as an elder of the faction? He asked as he looked at Gray. He didn't need to ask about his journey, since everyone heard about it. Gray was taken aback by the faction leader's straightforwardness, as well as the offer. I'm in no position to be an elder. He bowed, politely refusing the faction leader's offer. Your age doesn't matter, and you don't have to do anything while you're an elder. Given your current position in the faction, you are still obligated to carry out some missions after some time. But once you become an elder, you don't have to worry about that. Gray knew about this, but he still shook his head. I understand what you're saying, it's just, I still prefer being considered as a junior. I don't think there's anyone in this continent that considers you a junior. The faction leader replied to Gray's words. He gave up on the matter since it was clear that Gray clearly didn't want to take on such a status here. The duo spoke for a bit about the upcoming war, and then Gray left. His friend in the Pyrmont faction wasn't around, he could only head into his place for some rest. Time flew by, and before long, 2 months had gone by since Gray left the Littleton family. Read new chapters at MVL. The advances of the gnomes have been made clear, and from what has been said over the past month, some gnomes have been gathering at a particular region. In the woods a few hundred kilometers away from the Pyrmont faction. Gray was standing in the sky, arrays could be seen on both his arms, 2 arrays perfectly overlapping each other. The larger one was spinning around the smaller one. A large fire snake could be seen, the snake was around 7 meters long. When Gray started using this method of inscribing, he could only create a 3 meters long fire snake, but his strength has grown to the level where he could create a 7 meters long snake. This was thanks to the fact that he could create 2 arrays now. From what he learned from his grandfather while he was training with him, there were only 3 stages of this pattern of inscribing, which meant having 3 arrays overlapping each other. The beginner's stage was the use of 1 array on both arms, and then there's the intermediate stage, which is the use of 2 arrays, and lastly the advanced stage, which was the use of 3 arrays on both arms. Once he could get to the advanced stage, then there's a good chance that this fire snake would get to 15 meters at least. As at that time, the strength of the fire snake will be shocking. Gray looked at his arms and a smile appeared on his face. Finally, the intermediate stage. He sighed as he said, over the past 2 months, he has been training non-stop, and luckily he has been able to get to the intermediate stage of the inscribing method. Void appeared close to him and said, some people are heading towards this direction. Gray's eyes looked in the direction the auras were coming from. He recognized one of the auras as that of the Pyrmont faction leader. It's only been a month. Why's he here? He thought to himself. He knew firsthand that the battle hadn't started yet, and he was even the one who leaked the place the gnomes were supposed to use as a point of entry to the Aurora continent. If the gnomes had used that spot, they would have been able to come with a large number of experts in a short time and cause a heavy blow to the experts of the Aurora continent before they would even know what hit them. The strength of the next best one wouldn't be able to take 2 late-stage sovereigns passing through it within the space of 10 days. This means that the gnomes have to take their time, or look for another way into the Aurora continent. The 7th prince doesn't know all the portals available, and neither did Gray. So he knew the gnomes might still have other ways to get into the Aurora continent. Come on, let's go meet them. Gray flew in the direction the people were coming from. Void was at the late stages rank 8 magical beast. After he woke up from his sleep a month ago, he was already in the late stages. His strength was a bit better than a random 7th stage elemental sovereign. Chapter 1688 Reemergence of the Old Factions. Gray met up with the faction leader as well as a few elders who were present with him. Seeing the entourage that came with the faction leader, he couldn't help but ask what was happening. Remember those old factions we spoke about that have been in hiding? The faction leader asked. Gray nodded. He has heard about them a few times, from his father, and even the faction leader. They're coming out once again. And given their history, there's a lot for youths like you to learn from them. The faction leader explained. He paused to see Gray's reaction, before continuing, you'll be leading our faction's youths to visit one of the few factions we had a close connection with years ago. Gray has heard about how powerful the Pyrmont faction used to be, but after the war, they suffered heavy casualties, and the fact that they are still up is all thanks to a few of the old guys who are keeping the fort. The only reason other top factions haven't tried to take over the Pyrmont faction lies solely on the fact that a lot of other top factions and families are grateful to them for their sacrifices during the war and wouldn't sit still and watch people take over the Pyrmont faction. However, very few geniuses of high caliber tend to join them since then, which has resulted in the massive decline of the faction. In the past few hundred years, Gray is the only high caliber genius that has joined them. One of the reasons the Pyrmont faction has been spoken about during the past few years is purely due to the genius, Gray Dawson. Even though being part of the Dawson family overshadowed him being part of the Pyrmont faction, it still didn't change the fact that he was a member of the faction, hence giving it more recognition. A few geniuses have even joined the faction over the past year or so, which came as good news to the faction leader and the other old elders in the faction. Gray might not show his face too often, but almost whenever he's spoken about, it's about an absolutely incredible achievement. Hearing the faction leader's words, Gray was about to decline the offer when he heard the next part of the faction leader's words. You've not completed any mission over the past few months. You cannot reject this. Gray sighed. He wanted to reject, but with the faction leader's words, he knew he didn't have a say in the matter. When are we heading out? He asked. Tomorrow morning. All right. One of the elders looked at Gray. He was a 7th stage sovereign, and one of the few top experts in the faction. Other than the few grand elders, most of the other elders are from the 1st stage of the sovereign plane to the 9th stage. But the Pyrmont faction has very few 9th stage sovereigns, including the faction leader. There are only 8 9th stage sovereigns in the faction. He wanted to see if he stood a chance against Gray, and he had spoken with the faction leader about a potential sparring session with Gray. Gray, yes, Elder Benedict. Gray looked in the direction of the elder. This was one of the few elders he has been in contact with over the years he has been in the Pyrmont faction. There's this elder, and also the one who made sure Gray joined the faction. Other than the duo, as well as the faction leader, Gray didn't really interact much with the other elders. The said elder who made sure Gray joined the Pyrmont faction is currently only a 5th stage sovereign, while Gray has gotten to the 6th stage. The elder didn't even know if he could stand in Gray's presence anymore. He was present here, and he knew what Elder Benedict wanted to request from Gray. I'd like to spar with you. The elder went straight to the point. Gray didn't expect the elder to want to spar with him, and thinking of the new breakthrough he just achieved with his inscribing, he didn't have any issues with sparring with the elder. He readily agreed to spar with the elder. Why don't we take this back to the faction? The faction leader suggested. That way, you can also show the younger generation how powerful our faction's #1 genius is. Gray was already used to the faction leader placing him in such positions. In fact, the real reason he came to the woods to train this past few weeks was due to the faction leader wanting to send him to lead an expedition just like this one right now, only for that one, he's only following the group to act as a guard. The expedition will take a month or two, and he didn't have that time to waste. At least with leading the young geniuses to these old factions reopening, he would be able to at least see something new. Alright, I'm done with my training anyway. The Pyrmont faction was abuzz at the moment. The reason for this was simple. Gray Dawson, the faction's #1 genius, is sparring with an elder. While in the Pyrmont faction, Gray has always lived a secluded lifestyle, so most of the new recruits over the past year or so haven't been able to properly see him in action. Only the older ones have seen him fight. The battle against the Nether faction is still one of the most talked about battles till date in the faction. Gray's performance to ensure that they were able to secure the secret realm once again took him to legendary status in the eyes of the young members of the faction. Every single member of the Pyrmont faction who was around the faction grounds had run up to the faction's arena. The arena was filled to the brim and everyone was speaking animatedly, waiting for the duo who were about to battle. Elder Benedict was the first to arrive, and everyone started to wait for the person they all wanted to see, Gray Dawson. Chapter 1689. Is this what a genius is? Gray was dressed all black as he made his way to the arena. He hasn't been seen in a long time in the faction, and his face is something that's hard to forget. So the moment the first person who recognized him saw him, he brought the attention of everyone to Gray's gradually approaching figure. Gray's hair has never been kept too long. His hair was well combed back, and a small parting was in the front, as well as a curly strand falling in front of his face, just around his right eye, giving it a perfect styling for his face. He still had the same face he had when he first came to the faction, he just grew a bit taller and his face was a little more masculine, but it didn't take away his previous handsomeness, rather, he made him even more appealing to ladies. Previously, he could almost be taken as a lady due to the slight face fat he had, but now, his face was well chiseled, and the slight face fat was completely gone. When the new young ladies who joined the Pyrmont faction saw Gray's face, they were left breathless. They looked at him in awe. They couldn't believe a man could be this handsome. Gray didn't mind all the eyes he had on him. He walked to the platform and bowed softly to Elder Benedict. He took a look toward the area where the faction leader and the elders were seated and saw a familiar face, Grand Elder Archibald. This was the elder who wanted him dead due to a conflict he had with someone from the faction who was from the Grand Elder's family. Luckily, Gray's father arrived in time, stopping the Grand Elder from ending him. The faction leader stood up to address the crowd. You all know of Gray Dawson and his exploits. Today, we're going to show just how powerful our faction is and why no matter the situation, we are still one of the best factions in this continent. The faction leader gave a minute-long speech before telling the duo not to go overboard. To ensure the safety of the young members of the Pyrmont faction, the faction leader and Grand Elder Archibald set up a barrier, making sure the impact of the battle doesn't hurt anyone. In the entire Pyrmont faction, other than Gray, there's only one more person that has gotten to the sovereign plane in the younger generation, and this person is almost 10 years older than Gray. Not just that, but this person was also only in the first stage of the sovereign plane. Given how things usually are, this was very good progress. Gray is around 30 at the moment, but of course given how long elementalists live, he could still be called a youngster. In some places, they don't even regard anyone below 250 years of age as someone old. Even in the Pyrmont faction, those below 100 years are basically regarded as middle-aged. A 30-years-old 6th-stage elemental sovereign is a genius, no matter the era. Even during the era of the gods, these people would still be miles ahead of the rest. This just shows just how shocking Gray's cultivation speed was. The thing that made Gray even more freakish was his strength, which is stronger than his cultivation stage. From the first time he came to the faction, he has always been fighting across stages, and once again, he was about to do it. The others looked on with interest, waiting for Gray to show them what he's capable of. I can't believe I'm being used for an exhibition. This was what Gray felt his faction leader was doing. He was an artwork placed in an exhibition for others to look at. Gray looked at the elder who had a serious expression on his face, and said softly, "Please." Elder Benedict was a dual elementalist. This was something Gray knew after interacting with him over the years. Elder Benedict attacked, using the space element for his first attack. Gray was prepared for this. Sensing the destructive power coming his way from the space elemental attack, he couldn't help but click his tongue. The space element truly is a powerful element. While saying this, Elder Benedict's control over he tried to use the space element to dodge the attack, but he noticed that Elder Benedict blocked the space around the attack, meaning as long as the attack gets within a certain range of the target, it's impossible for the target to use the space element to escape. After dodging the attack, Gray stretched both his arms in front of him, and 2 arrays appeared on both. With the emergence of the array came a 7 meters long fire snake. The aura the snake gave off scared the shit out of the first stage sovereign who was part of the younger generation like Gray. From where he was seated, he knew 100% that if he was struck by this snake, he'd be dead. Is this what a genius is? This was the question in his head, not just him, but that of the others who were around Gray's age. None of them would be able to withstand this attack. In fact, it didn't need to be directed towards them. Just the impact alone will be enough to take them out, and just the thought of this almost sent them into depression. And like most people, they thought the same way. He can't really be called a genius, so it doesn't count. They felt Gray was above what could be regarded as geniuses, so it didn't matter. Chapter 1690 An Unexpected Scenario. Elder Benedict saw the array on Gray's arms, and when he saw the fire snake, he couldn't help but take in a deep breath. This was the special ability of the Littleton family, and it was recently made known that Gray's mother is a genius from the Littleton family, hence the reason he was taken there to master this technique. Everyone knew of his abilities as an inscriber a long time ago since he always uses his inscriptions when fighting. Now that he has gone to level up the ability of his inscribing, it's unimaginable how powerful he would be now. Elder Benedict didn't panic. He had fought with someone from the Littleton family years ago, so this wasn't the first time he was seeing this. The reaction of the crowd didn't bother him, rather, he prepared for the incoming attack. Gray using this from the start shows how seriously he took this match. The faction leader was impressed. He knew that what Gray had been training on while he was in the woods was this, and seeing that he was already close to full mastery, which was the advanced stage, he couldn't help but be once again shocked by Gray's speed in learning. The fact that he was an obsessive learner made things easier for him. He was already at this stage, yet he wasn't showing any signs of slowing down. Boom! Gray's fire snake screeched as if it was alive and rushed at Elder Benedict. Elder Benedict used his fire element to create a rope that he used to try to limit the movement of the snake. The fire rope tightened on the neck of the fire snake, but the strength of the snake was not something Elder Benedict prepared for. The rope snapped from a heavy shake from the snake, which went on to spew a stream of flames in the direction of Elder Benedict. Elder Benedict let himself be enveloped by the sea of flames, and everyone saw the flames slowly started to shrink, before disappearing completely. The duo soon started to exchange moves with each other. At first, their attacks were slow, and it was clear to see that they were just warming up. A minute after the start of the sparring session, the duo were fighting at lightning speed. Both parties being space elementalists meant that they could appear anywhere on the platform whenever they wanted. They were moving so fast that all the youngsters could see were flashing lights and explosions from attacks colliding. A lightning bolt shot down from the sky as the duo were fighting. A crack could be seen in the void, opening up the dangerous spatial cracks that swallowed the lightning that was aimed at the head of Elder Benedict. The spatial crack disappeared immediately after. Elder Benedict knew not to keep a spatial crack open for too long, so as not to risk endangering people. As the battle started to get to the 2-minute mark, the faction leader and the Grand Elder could already tell how the outcome would be. The duo exchanged glances and the same thought flashed through their heads. Gray is holding back. This was the thought that came to their heads as they saw the duo fight. Whenever either of them was dealing with the opposition's attacks, it's easy to see who was having a hard time, and who was having an easy time. Gray was very relaxed as he blocks each of Elder Benedict's attacks, while Elder Benedict on the other hand has been forced repeatedly to scamper just to block one attack. If Gray were to use that strength for each of his attacks, he would be able to defeat the Elder within a minute. The duo presumed that Gray wanted to help Elder Benedict save face. Even though everyone expected Gray to win the sparring session, it would be too disheartening, especially for Elder Benedict if he were to lose without even being able to show his might. Gray could be said to be very sensible given how he was handling the fight. Everything was under his control, and he was making sure he didn't make it look that way to those below the 8th stage of the Sovereign Plane. Only people like the faction leader and the Grand Elder will be able to easily notice this. An 8th stage Sovereign will only be able to take note of this after a few minutes. Boom, bam, bang. Gray was showing his strength to the faction, likewise Elder Benedict. Since the start of the battle, he had used 4 elements already: his space element, lightning, earth, and fire element. Elder Benedict was still in the midst of defending against an attack when he sensed the temperature drop. Not just on the platform, the temperature in the entire arena dropped. Gray could also use the water element, not just that, but he had also awoken his water domain when he made use of the dragon essence. Ice shards appeared around the platform, covering almost every inch of the platform, and all of them were facing the same person, Elder Benedict. Seeing Gray using 5 elements sent the entire faction on its head. They've heard the rumors, but seeing it for the first time left them stunned. A multi-elementalist with 5 elements, being as strong as Gray, was a rare sight. Now the young geniuses who were already using the thought of Gray being above the level of geniuses to console themselves felt even more convinced that he shouldn't be regarded as a genius. If Gray were to say he was a genius, would any of them have the guts to say that they too were a genius? The answer is a resounding no. Elder Benedict laughed as he saw this, and his aura exploded, climbing to the very peak of the 7th stage, almost on the verge of breaking through to the 8th stage. The eyes of Gray and the faction leader showed a hint of surprise. Apparently, Elder Benedict wanted to use the pressure from facing Gray to get to the 8th stage. Just the thought of this alone was shocking. Normally, it was the Elder pressuring the youngster, but in this case, it was reversed. Chapter 1691. Sorry, I got carried away. Gray didn't expect that someone in the 6th stage of the Sovereign Plane would be able to actually force a 7th stage Sovereign to advance. It's clear that no matter what the outcome of the battle is, Elder Benedict will benefit greatly from it. From what Gray knew, Elder Benedict has been stuck in the 7th stage of the Sovereign Plane for almost 150 years now. Elder Benedict has been in the Pyrmont faction for around 300 years or so. If not for Gray and his friends who are advancing at a shocking speed, it's normal for a Sovereign to spend around 10 years in a single stage. Some people are even stuck for around 30 to 50 years, especially once they are about to cross to the mid or late stages. Gray has seen an Elder that has been stuck in the 3rd stage of the Sovereign Plane long before he came to the Pyrmont faction, and even till date, said Elder was still in the third stage of the sovereign plane, unable to make the move to the fourth stage. Neither Gray nor his friends suffered such a setback. The longest Gray has spent stuck in a particular stage was when he was at the peak of the origin plane. And when he eventually broke through, his strength saw a massive spike. Gray didn't dwell in the matter as he focused on Elder Benedict, whose strength has seen an increase. In a battle between sovereigns, a small increase in strength can easily make a difference. The ice shards Gray created shot at Elder Benedict. Elder Benedict exploded with a sea of flames that covered his entire body. The flames were stronger than what it used to be, even the heat of the flames was on a different level. This time, Elder Benedict moved after blocking the multiple ice shards with his flames. His figure shot out of the flames, charging at Gray. Gray didn't panic, his eyes were relaxed as a snowstorm started, but that was not the only thing. The snowstorm had lightning arcs in them, and just when everyone thought he was done, something unexpected happened. A powerful gust of wind rose, making the lightning and snowstorm even fiercer. Elder Benedict, who was recently invigorated from his sudden increase in strength, felt like the breath was knocked out of him. He paused and looked at the massive lightning and snowstorm that was being fueled by the ferocity of a wind cyclone. 6. He almost wanted to cry out in fear. Around the entire arena, everyone stood up from their seats, staring at the scene before them, speechless. Gray was using 6 elements, 6. The moment they clocked what was happening, they couldn't contain themselves. The entire arena erupted, even Elder Benedict could hardly stay focused. A large lightning and snow cyclone was coming his way, but he just stood there in the air, unable to make a move. It was as if he would be engulfed in it anyway, so why move? The faction leader stood up and looked in Gray's direction. His eyes were on the cyclone, and then he recalled something. They never checked Gray's elemental affinity when he joined the faction. Even during the period he showed his outstanding performances, they never thought of checking his elemental affinity. This was because Gray has only been using mainly 3 elements since he joined the faction: fire, earth, and space. A few years ago, he heard a rumor from some people that when Gray first rose to fame in the lower regions, he would occasionally use the lightning, wind, or water elements. But then he watched Gray battle in serious competitions where he stuck only to using the initial 3 elements. He was impressed as he thought about this. Gray using these 3 elements made it perfectly possible for him not to use his other elements. The earth element could be used for defense and some powerful attacks. The fire element is used as his main attack option since it was very destructive. While his space element substituted for his movement, these 3 elements were perfect, and yet he had 3 more elements. Then a thought came to the faction leader's mind. Doesn't that mean he's been holding back since he joined the faction? The second this thought came to the faction leader's mind, his heart started to pound in his chest, as if it wanted to jump out. He noticed that he was out of breath, but that was not the problem. The problem was that the lightning and snow cyclone was about to engulf Elder Benedict, and just like everyone, he was too shocked to even move. Gray, don't end the fight now. He needs more time to get the best out of his enlightenment. He quickly transmitted his thoughts to Gray. If Elder Benedict was stopped now, his momentum wouldn't be enough for him to advance quickly. He might even miss the chance to break through to the next stage. Of course, since he has already felt this state before, he would be able to go back eventually, but it will take too long. With the war coming, the sooner he broke through, the higher his odds of surviving. Gray soon realized this and scratched his nose, transmitting his voice to the faction leader. Sorry, I got carried away. He apologized. Gray's apology almost made the faction leader spit out a mouthful of blood. He got carried away? That's what you call getting carried away? The faction leader's entire body shook as he tried to control his emotions. If anyone else heard their conversation, they would want to beat the brakes off Gray. Elder Benedict, who was about to be enveloped by the lightning and snow cyclone, noticed that it slowed down significantly, and when he looked in Gray's direction, he immediately understood what Gray was doing. He wanted the fight to last longer. Thank you, he mouthed to Gray, before quickly retreating. The entire scene only happened in a matter of 2 seconds. Only the Grand Elder noticed the sudden decrease in the cyclone, and immediately Elder Benedict retreated. It regained its previous speed. Chapter 1692. Overwhelming Strength. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Grand Elder Archibald couldn't help but think about his past actions. Thinking of the fact that he almost killed such a genius made him feel like he truly was stupid. Luckily, Gray's father was able to stop him in time. Being the person to kill such a genius all because of a silly mistake a child from his family committed wasn't worth it. Although Grand Elder Archibald didn't still have a good impression of Gray, He can't deny the fact that Gray is a 1 in a billion years genius, and there's a very high chance that he will be able to take them back to the top, if not even the very top of the Aurora continent. Seeing the Pyrmont faction rise to the top is one of his dreams, and since Gray burst into the scene, the faction was getting more and more recognition, and even a few young geniuses have joined them over the years. Elder Benedict acted quickly. The opportunity he was given by Gray, he didn't want to miss out on it. The fact that Gray was able to notice that he needed more time made him relieved. A sea of flames appeared in front of Gray, but the flames were dealt with easily by Gray. He not only stopped the flames, he used his inscribing to create another long snake made from flames. This time, the snake didn't immediately attack, rather, it watched for some time. Elder Benedict was wary of the fire snake. He could tell that it was quite powerful, and also very different from the usual snakes made from flames fire elementalists usually create. Gray launched an attack with a lightning bolt. Just as Elder Benedict was about to block the lightning bolt, the fire snake made with the inscription shot at him. He was faced with two powerful attacks that he had to defend. The timing of Gray's second attack was impeccable. If Elder Benedict decides to wait for both attacks, then he would be struck by lightning. If he decides to block the lightning attack first, he will not have enough time to prepare for the fire snake attacks. Elder Benedict was under a lot of pressure, but he didn't let it get to him. He calmed himself and created a firewall that blocked the path of the fire snake, while using the space element to evade the lightning bolt. The only issue was that, the second he tried to disappear with the aid of the space element, he sensed that the lightning bolt was locked onto him. There was no way to evade it. I'll have to take it head on. This was the only choice. Gray using the space element to make the lightning bolt unavoidable wasn't something Elder Benedict prepared for. Boom! The attack hit Elder Benedict, sending him flying. His figure crashed into the platform, and before the dust could even rise from the crash, two more lightning bolts shot into the dust from where Elder Benedict crashed. Those below the 7th stage of the Sovereign Plane couldn't see what was happening due to the dust cloud, but the others above it could clearly see it. Elder Benedict was being battered by the lightning bolts. Gray didn't stop at just 2 lightning bolts. He sent continuous lightning, attacking Elder Benedict, who's forced to take each attack head-on. Gray's attacks were too powerful, so even when he manages to block the attacks, the impact rocks his entire body. Elder Benedict has been hit repeatedly by lightning and he could already feel his body starting to go numb. At this rate, if he continues the fight, he will be seriously injured. The only reason he wasn't seriously hurt at the moment is due to the fact that Gray was taking it easy on him. Grand Elder Archibald and the other elders who could clearly see what was happening shook their heads. There's no way Elder Benedict was on the same level as Gray. With the strength Gray has shown, only those in the 8th stage of the Sovereign Plane could go toe-to-toe with him. Anyone below that will be fully suppressed by him, with ease no less. Bam, bang, boom. Gray's constant attacks didn't stop, and the dust cloud continued to rise. Elder Benedict was fully overpowered by Gray. He couldn't even get out of the dust cloud. Gray created 2 fire snakes with his inscription, adding them to the lightning bolts attacking Elder Benedict. Elder Benedict felt immense pressure, but he didn't give up immediately. The more pressure he feels, the better it was for him, given that he would most likely advance after this battle. The youths in the crowd couldn't believe that Gray was being this dominant over an elder who has a higher cultivation stage. Even though they knew Gray would win after hearing of his battle with the elder from the Littleton family, they still didn't expect it to be such a crushing victory. Elder Benedict wasn't able to show too much of his strength today. It's not that he was weak, his opponent was just too strong that it made it seem like he wasn't even trying to fight in the first place. A minute later, Gray's attacks stopped, following Elder Benedict voicing out his submission. There was no way he could continue any longer. The pressure has gotten to the stage where it has refined him to the limit, and anything more will only break him, so there was no need staying under such heavy attacks any longer. He bowed to Elder Benedict before departing from the platform. He didn't stay in the arena as there was no need to. The reason he came was to battle with Elder Benedict, and since he was done with that, he wanted to rest until it was time to head out the next morning. Gray wasn't the only one who left. The entire arena soon became empty. As everyone left, they could still see Gray's dominant figure floating in the air as he attacked Elder Benedict non-stop in their heads. 1693 Visiting an old dormant faction. The next morning, Gray gathered in a large open space in the Pyrmont faction. He was accompanied by a familiar face, Keith, his only friend in the faction. The duo joined the faction at the same time, and Gray was the one who helped Keith achieve a good status in the faction. At the moment, Keith could be regarded as one of the top geniuses in the faction. He's not at the elemental sovereign plane yet, but he's already in the late stages of the venerable plane. Keith's growth has been massive, way faster than anything Gray imagined. The last time Gray was with Keith, he helped Keith advance to the venerable plane. It has been some months or so, and Keith has already gotten to the late stages of the venerable plane. In any faction, someone his age that's in the late stages of the venerable plane can be regarded as a top genius. The number of geniuses over the venerable plane in the Pyrmont faction was quite low, lower than that of other top factions, and this could be attributed to their previously bad situation. Keith stood beside Gray, as they waited for the faction leader and the elders to arrive. Gray was the leader of the younger generation, and even if he refused to be, there's no one amongst the younger generation that will be willing to lead someone like Gray. All eyes were on Gray. His performance the previous day was still replaying in the heads of all the youths present. Some of them even tried to approach Gray, and although he didn't chase them away, he also wasn't very welcoming. The older members of the faction, those who were here when Gray shot to fame, all knew that Gray didn't enjoy being surrounded by too many people. He always keeps to himself and would only reply to people out of courtesy. A few minutes went by before the faction leader and the elders all arrived. Grand Elder Archibald and another Grand Elder were part of the group. The faction's Grand Elders are half-god plane experts, all four. Most top factions have more than 4 Grand Elders in this cultivation realm, but since the Pyrmont faction are no longer in their glory days, these 4 were the only ones they could produce. Only 2 of the Grand Elders could leave the faction since the other 2 had to stay behind and guard the faction in case of any issues. The 2 Grand Elders leading the group were the last to break through to the half-god plane, so they weren't as strong as the 2 staying behind. The faction leader appeared beside the 2 Grand Elders. He looked at Grand Elder Archibald and then his gaze turned to Gray. He shook his head. If not for Gray's father, Grand Elder Archibald would have killed Gray already. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He addressed the younger generations of the faction before they left. On this expedition, you'll realize just how powerful those old dormant factions are. Try not to do anything rash, but remember, don't disgrace the name of our faction. We might not be as strong as we used to be in the past, but it doesn't mean that we will bow our heads to anyone. With these words, he turned around and a large flying ship appeared in the sky. The group traveling to the Pyrmont faction was around 50 in numbers, 7 elders, 2 Grand Elders, the faction leader, and 40 youths, led by Gray Dawson. He stood up and walked out of his room. The sight that welcomed him was one of a lush mountain, and on the mountain top he could see a large building. He could sense an energy wave coming from there, as well as spatial disturbances. There's clearly a teleportation portal there, hence the reason for the spatial disturbances. A few kilometers to the north of the building was where he sensed the presence of the necromancers. 2046. The Pyrmont faction weren't the only ones who were heading out to meet up with these old dormant factions. Some other top factions were also doing the same. There was a lot that could be learned from these factions, and since the war was on the horizon, they needed to level up as fast as possible. Gray didn't see Elder Benedict amongst the elders, which he expected. Given the gains from the battle the previous day, it's normal that he would want to stay behind and improve his strength. He's only in the 7th stage of the Sovereign Plane. Getting to the 8th stage, and even possibly the 9th stage was all that was important for him if he wanted to survive this war. Not just Elder Benedict, but everyone else needs to increase their strengths if they want to increase their chances of survival. The group of 50 all entered the ship. According to what Gray heard from the faction leader, it would take 2 days before the group gets to the faction. This faction is a fire-based faction. 2 days went by in a flash. Gray was sitting in his room, seated in a meditative position. His closed eyes opened as he looked in a certain direction. He sensed an energy wave, but not just that. Necromancers? Although it's been a while, he could still sense necromancers whenever he's within a certain distance from them. He stood up and walked out of his room. The sight that welcomed him was one of a lush mountain, and on the mountain top he could see a large building. He could sense an energy wave coming from there, as well as spatial disturbances. There's clearly a teleportation portal there, hence the reason for the spatial disturbances. A few kilometers to the north of the building was where he sensed the presence of the necromancers. Given his current cultivation stage, there were very few necromancers that could threaten him. And those necromancers would at least be at the peak of the Sovereign Plane. He thought about it and decided against going. He also didn't tell anyone from the faction. There's a good chance that these necromancers have a close tie with this faction, or maybe they have someone who's part of the faction, and with a good status too since they could have a hideout so close to the faction portal. Either that or they were just too foolish or too confident in their abilities. 1694 The Pyro faction. The ship stopped above the building at the top of the mountain, and everyone from the Pyrmont faction exited the ship. Gray's group was behind the faction leader as well as the elders. Anywhere other than these old dormant faction, and this would have been a very powerful group. However, to these old dormant factions, as well as some of the top factions and families, this lineup wouldn't intimidate them. Gray looked at the large tablet that had the words, Pyro faction boldly written on it. There were drawings of flames around the writing, as well as a fiery symbol. He had seen a symbol like this before, but he just couldn't figure out where he saw it. He didn't look around too much as he knew there was nothing here. His gaze drifted to the direction he sensed the necromancer's camp from, and he couldn't help but furrow his brows. Keith seemed to sense that something was wrong with Gray. He walked close to him and asked jokingly, "What's wrong? Don't tell me you're nervous like the rest of us." Gray was brought back from his train of thoughts. He chuckled and nodded. This is an ancient faction after all, a faction that has been standing since the time of the Great War against the gnomes. Well, our faction is also a faction that survived the war. Keith reminded Gray. I know, but even a blind man can see the difference. Gray shook his head. The duo were not the only ones whispering among the youths. The tablet with the words written on it gave a feeling of grandeur that to a certain extent was intimidating. There was also a fiery aura coming from it. It's almost as if staring at it for too long will make one's eyes burn out. Gray didn't feel intimidated by these people though, he just didn't want to feel too special, again. As they entered the building, they saw the sight of 5 people waiting for them. 2 old men with white hair could be seen standing by the side, while 3 youths were standing in the middle of the group. When they saw the faction leaders group, a smile appeared on the face of one of the youths as he spoke up, "Uncle Bertram, it's been a while." Gray's gaze drifted to the faction leader. He knew the faction leader's name was Bertram, but what he didn't understand was why this person referred to him as uncle. Could it be that he has some connections with this faction? This was the question in Gray's head. Ezekiel, faction leader Bertram nodded at the youth before changing his gaze to the 2 elders by the side. Both were in the half-god plane. You must be exhausted, please. Ezekiel led the way as the group followed behind. They walked towards the middle of the large building, and there they saw it. A large array was laid out on the ground, and it was seemingly a teleportation array. Before coming in, Gray thought all he'd see was a portal. But to his surprise, it's a teleportation array. Ezekiel had 2 youths with him which he introduced as they led the group to the array. Nathan and Harry, but were 6th stage sovereigns. Ezekiel is already an 8th stage sovereign. The 2 elders were there to ensure the safety of the group in case of any unforeseen events. With 2 half-god plane elementalists beside them, unless they were ambushed by at least 4 half-god plane elementalists, then they didn't have to worry about anything. The edge was empty, but Gray sensed the presence of a powerful individual there. Gray wasn't the only one. The 2 grand elders had already sensed this presence a long time ago, as well as faction leader Bertram. With the exception of these 3, Gray was the only one who sensed this presence. 2047. The 2 elders who were with Ezekiel and the others had a shocked expression on their faces when they noticed this. The person hiding there was one of the guardians of the faction. Only those from the peak of the sovereign plane and above could sense this person. Even Ezekiel and the rest didn't know of this guardian's presence, yet Gray seemed to have sensed him. The 2 grand elders as well as the elders exchanged pleasantries before both parties fell silent. The Pyro faction had an 8th stage elemental sovereign who might be around Gray's age, or only a few years older. Not just him, Nathan and Harry were around Gray's age too, and they were both in the 6th stage, just like Gray. Suddenly, Gray being a 6th stage sovereign didn't seem to mean much in the eyes of the other youths from the Pyrmont faction. However, they didn't feel like Gray would lose out to either of the duo. As for Ezekiel, his cultivation stage was too high, so they didn't feel it was wrong to assume that he's stronger than Gray. Gray's gaze remained the same as usual, indifferent. He didn't really care about the cultivation stages of these guys. All he wanted to see was if there was anything he could learn from this place. If not, there's no point staying here for too long. Just like the youths from the Pyrmont faction, those from the Pyro faction were sizing the youths from the Pyrmont faction, and their eyes were locked on one person, Gray. He stuck out like a sour thumb in this group. The Pyrmont faction had very few youths in the Sovereign Plane, and they were all in the early stages of the Sovereign Plane. Gray on the other hand was already a 6th stage sovereign, which showed that he wasn't in the same category as the others. Ezekiel, Nathan, Harry, as well as the other two elders could see the change of expression of those youths, and even some of the elders. Only two elders, the two grand elders, as well as faction leader Bertram had an indifferent face. It's normal for these people, but for someone as young as Gray seeing these people, they expected him to have a change of reaction, but he didn't. This made them very curious about him. Just as they were about to leave with the teleportation array, Gray's gaze suddenly turned sharp as he looked at one of the edges of the building. The edge was empty, but Gray sensed the presence of a powerful individual there. Gray wasn't the only one. The two grand elders had already sensed this presence a long time ago, as well as faction leader Bertram. With the exception of these three, Gray was the only one who sensed this presence. The two elders who were with Ezekiel and the others had a shocked expression on their faces when they noticed this. The person hiding there was one of the guardians of the faction. Only those from the peak of the sovereign plane and above could sense this person. Even Ezekiel and the rest didn't know of this guardian's presence, yet Gray seemed to have sensed him. Chapter 1695 Void's First Thought. The group soon disappeared from view. At the spot Gray looked at before they were teleported away, a figure appeared. It was that of a middle-aged man, and he had a strange look on his face. Such a talent appeared in the world? He muttered to himself. He paused for some time before muttering again, could that be Gray Dawson? Although these ancient factions have stayed hidden for thousands of years, they were still up to date about the world and its happenings. They've heard of the genius that rocked even the gnomes, that he was placed on their kill list. It has been a few years since the gnomes wanted to kill Gray, yet he is still alive, growing at an unprecedented pace. This middle-aged man knew of Lucas Dawson. He has come to disturb them once or twice, and they've even exchanged a few moves. Over the past hundreds of years that this middle-aged man has been guarding this place, Lucas Dawson is the only genius who has caught the attention of everyone. At that time, he was told to even try to recruit him. Lucas, however, rejected his offer. The next time he saw Lucas, he was already on the same cultivation stage as himself. They exchanged blows and he noticed that Lucas, who hadn't been in the half-god plane for a long time, wasn't inferior to him who has been a half-god for thousands of years. The figure etched Gray's face in his head before disappearing once again. He's the one who's in charge of guarding this array. If there were any issues, he could destroy it and leave. Every few hundred years, the guardians are changed, and he has been here for a few hundred years now. Only two people have piqued his interest over these few hundred years, and they were the father and son duo of Lucas and Gray Dawson. He initially thought he wouldn't see anyone of Lucas's caliber again, since Lucas was even more talented than most of those from ancient factions like the Pyro faction. Yet some moments ago, he saw someone that could be even more outstanding than Lucas, who is already the cream of the crop even for ancient factions. That place will get noisy real soon. I hope he's not a humble person, he thought to himself as he hid away. Somewhere in the Aurora continent, Gray and the others appeared inside an open space in what looked like a cave, which wasn't what they expected. They looked around and there it was, a 20 meters wide portal. Gray knew a portal led to these hidden factions, but he didn't expect that they'd take the struggle of using a teleportation array to first get here before using the portal. He looked around and noticed that the entire cave was sealed. He couldn't even sense anything outside the walls. It was as if this space was created inside a mountain, and the entire mountain was sealed. There's no way to locate this place even if you're sent here through that array. Very thorough, I must say, Gray thought to himself. He knew getting to these ancient factions would be difficult, but he didn't expect them to be this meticulous. Ezekiel and the others led them into the portal. Their group walked behind those from the Pyro faction. The closer they got to the portal, the more they could feel the higher density of the elemental particles in the air. Even this cave has a better elemental essence than the best place in the Pyrmond faction, which was a bit embarrassing, given their status. They walked through the portal, and a large world welcomed them. Just like most of the hidden worlds Gray has entered, he was welcomed by the wind against his face, but the wind felt different. It was as if there's something in the wind that signifies that he was standing in another world. They appeared on top of a mountain, a temple-like building. Looking down from the mountain, they could see multiple buildings. Not just buildings, but there were people moving about. The times Gray has entered these hidden worlds of ancient fractions, he was usually welcomed by depolated buildings. This time, however, was different. The buildings were standing strong, and the place was filled with life. It wasn't like the other places he has been to. The roars of magical beasts could be heard around, but unlike the previous ones where the magical beasts would be roaming alone, in this case, most of these magical beasts were mounted. A prestigious roar was heard, and Gray was familiar with a roar like that, a dragon. Gray looked to the sky, and there it was. The majestic dragon could be seen flying in the sky, and looking closely, he could see a slender figure seated on the dragon. His gaze didn't linger, as this wasn't the first time he was seeing a dragon. He looked away, keeping his gaze on the place. There are a lot of goodies here. It's a shame if we dared to touch anyone, we'll be found out immediately. Void's voice filled with pain resounded in Gray's head. The second Gray heard Void's words, he almost tripped on his own feet, even though he was standing. They just got into a world that had experts from thousands of years ago, and the first thing that Void could think of was stealing treasures. You better not try anything stupid. He warned. He didn't forget about the bunny leader, and you too. If you two try anything, I'll leave you guys here. Do you think I can't get out of this place? The bunny leader's mocking voice entered Gray's ears. He couldn't help but recall that he first met the bunny leader in the Trial Land, which he had already guessed was an ancient faction that was destroyed after the war. The next place he found the bunny leader was also one of such hidden worlds, so in truth, the bunny leader could indeed leave this place if it wanted to. Chapter 1696. Essence Veins. At the center of the secret world where the pyro faction was located, Gray saw a small island, around a kilometer in radius, floating in the air. He was a good distance away, but he could still sense that the entire island is kept in the sky with the aid of an array. Gray looked at the land floating in the sky, and the essence he could sense from that place alone was tremendous. If he were told there's a place that had so much essence in the Aurora continent, he'd never believe it. In the group, Gray wasn't the only one who had his eyes on the floating land. All the youths were also staring at it intently. When Ezekiel and his companions saw their looks, they shook their heads. There was even a hint of disdain in their eyes. This was something they've grown accustomed to seeing, but now these guys were staring like it was something impossible to achieve in this world. Gray didn't spend a long time staring at the floating land. He barely gets shocked when he sees things like these. Faction leader Bertram walked closer to Gray, as if seeing his show of disinterest in the floating land. He chuckled and asked Gray, "Do you know about essence veins?" He whispered to Gray. Hearing the words essence veins, Gray recalled reading about it. When he first came to the Aurora continent, the first thing he did was read about the history and everything he could learn from books in the Aurora continent. Apparently, thousands of years ago, the Aurora continent was filled with hundreds of veins, which brought about a large growth in humans. As at that time, achieving godhood doesn't seem as impossible as it does now. Gray hadn't heard about seeing any essence veins in the Aurora continent, since according to what he knew, after the Great War, most of the veins were either exhausted or destroyed. In multiple of the ancient factions that collapsed during the Great War, they self-destructed their essence veins when they noticed they were about to be defeated by the gnomes who attacked them. The essence veins are one of the few resources the gnomes wanted to extract from the human world. Unfortunately, it's not the only thing, else the gnomes wouldn't want to try to invade the Aurora continent once again after their failure the last time. There are some things that can't grow in the gnome world, and it's very beneficial to the growth of gnomes. It even aids them when they're on the verge of breaking the barrier and ascend to godhood. Gray nodded to the faction leader after some time. A vein is here, and it's why you noticed the massive spike in the quality of the essence present here. Gray could already guess this when he heard the faction leader's words. He didn't expect to see an essence vein in the first ancient faction he visited. If only I started out here. This was the thought in the heads of everyone present, even Gray wasn't an exception. This place was heavenly to elementalists. If he had started his cultivation here, he's confident that he'd at least be a peak 9th stage sovereign by now who's preparing to break through to the half-god plane. Gray took a glance at Ezekiel and the rest and he couldn't help but feel a tad disappointed in their abilities. The fact that they hadn't gotten to the 9th stage of the sovereign plane while being in such an essence-rich condition shows that they were lacking in a lot of things. Even Klouse, who had the lowest elemental grade of the group when they started out in the Lunar Academy, wouldn't do this bad if he were dropped here. If the group had come to a place like this when they just got to the Aurora continent, there's a great chance that they might have broken through to the 9th stage by now, even though they would be behind others when they first arrived. Gray hasn't spent more than a year in the sovereign plane, yet he was already in the 6th stage. A lot of people spend years in a single stage in the sovereign plane. Take Elder Benedict for example. He has been stuck in the 7th stage for hundreds of years, and it was only due to luck while battling with Gray did he get some sort of epiphany that helped him break through the chains holding him back. Ezekiel and his group noticed Gray's gaze, and the hint of pride they had in their eyes while staring at the others disappeared. This is because they could tell from Gray's gaze that he seemed to be looking down on them. Ezekiel felt irritated by this look. It was the first time someone was giving him this sort of look, someone that isn't her. He approached Gray and made a comment. I know you don't see things like these every day in the outside world. Gray kept his gaze on him, but he stopped looking down on him. After all, he couldn't be that blatant with it. Naturally not. He responded and turned his gaze back to the world. Are you going to take us in or? Gray noticed that no one was making a move, and Ezekiel, their supposed host, wasn't making any attempts to take them further into the pyro faction. It was as if he wanted them to just look from the gate, which didn't sit too well with Gray. The elders from the pyro faction were the first to realize that standing there might have been wrong. Hearing Gray's question, they couldn't help but drop their heads. Actually, this was all Ezekiel's idea. He said he wanted to show those from the outside world the prestige of a great faction. They didn't expect that someone would speak up, and the person isn't even the faction leader nor an elder, but a youth. This made the elders feel a bit embarrassed by their actions. Forgive my manners, please, this way. Ezekiel reacted quickly, inviting them in. Chapter 1697. Pyro World. The Pyro World. This was how it was called by Ezekiel and the others. The fire elemental essence in this place was greater than that of any other elemental essence, and it's understandable since the Pyro faction is a fire elemental faction. The factions prioritizes the growth of their top fire elementalists' geniuses than that of other elements. It's only when they see that even with another element, said geniuses aren't losing out to their peers of the fire element do they train them fully. As the group walked into the Pyro World, which was covered by woods and buildings from place to place. There are places that are just buildings for hundreds of meters, while there are places with just woods. The entire place was created in the middle of 5 mountains. Gray didn't know what was outside the mountains, and he didn't really bother to try to pry. This wasn't a place he dared to act wantonly. He might not be afraid of them, but it didn't mean that he could act however he wanted. Hence the reason he warned Void and the bunny leader as soon as they entered this place. That duo weren't used to acting according to norm, and Void has almost gotten him killed a few times over the years due to this attitude. The rewards however are worth it in most cases, so he doesn't dwell on the fact that he almost died getting the treasure. The lowest cultivation stage in this place was the Overlord Plane. Those in the Overlord Plane are treated like normal people. In the Aurora continent, you'd still see people in the Arcane Plane, and even the Fusion Plane. But in the Pyro World, there was not a single elementalist that is below the Overlord Plane. Even those who just awakened their elemental affinities were in the Overlord Plane. How can they start from the Overlord Plane? Gray felt like the world isn't fair. In Red City, where he was from, even an Arcane Plane elementalist is regarded with prestige there. The way a peak 9th stage sovereign is treated in a place like the Aurora continent is how an Arcane Plane elementalist is treated in Red City. It couldn't be helped. Those in the Sage Plane are almost regarded as gods in the Azure continent while he was still there. Only after he came to the Aurora continent did he realize that the Sage Plane was just the beginning. Any random child here that's above 12 years old is enough to become an overlord of a city. Some wouldn't even mind creating an entire empire with their cultivation stage. If anyone from Red City was dropped here, they'd most likely faint from being overwhelmed by what they were seeing. Gray didn't speak as they walked through the Pyro World. He only observed and reminisced about how far he had come. He hasn't gotten to where he wanted to be, but he's getting closer to it. True Dawn. He couldn't help but recall the trial lands he visited a long time ago now. As at then, all he wanted to do was become an Origin Plane elementalist and be regarded with prestige and honor. But then he got his hands on something that changed the life of his friends, as well as his own. They were hunted down like criminals by the entire continent, and in the end, he had to fight against them. The principal was still injured from that battle. His teacher was the one who saved them. Thinking about it, that was also his first encounter with gnomes. A lot really has happened over the years. He gave a deep sigh as he walked with the group. He didn't try to do anything, but he still stood out in the group. His facial features are just too captivating, that even when people don't want to, they're unknowingly drawn to him. He's already used to this, it's not like he could change how he looks. After walking for a short time, they soon got to the center of the Pyro World, where the floating land was situated. Now, I'll take you to the Pyro faction. Ezekiel motioned from them to step on a platform that was in the open. The group did as they were told, and as soon as everyone was standing on the platform, Ezekiel made a few hand seals, and the platform made a creaking sound, before uprooting from the ground and taking the group into the sky, heading for the floating island above them. On their way there, Gray saw the dragon once again, landing on the floating island. A few seconds later, they got to the island. A large gate welcomed them as they got to the floating island. A large wall that was almost 100 meters tall rose up, and on a large gate, the word pyro was boldly written on it. Just standing a few meters away, one could feel the intense heat coming from just that word. The rest youths, especially those in the venerable plane, could feel their hearts racing as they were staring at it. Gray was indifferent. He has been in a cauldron that could be said to have cooked him, which helped him increase the intensity of his flames. This isn't enough to impress him. Ezekiel and the others had a proud expression when they noticed the reactions of the youngsters, but then again, there was an anomaly, Gray, who still didn't seem surprised. It's normal when it's the elders, but seeing Gray act like there was nothing that could move him made these guys feel like Gray is used to feeling high and mighty just because he's the top genius among those from his faction, and the gap wasn't even close. But in the Pyro faction, there were more than 100 youths in the 6th stage of the Sovereign Plane who were Gray's age. Some are even younger. I'll see how you react when you see them. Chapter 1698. Pyro World 2. The group walked past the large door, entering the Pyro faction. As soon as Gray stepped foot into the faction, he noticed multiple powerful senses locking onto him. He looked around and saw a few people who some of those senses belonged to. 3 youths who were in the 7th stage of the Sovereign Plane were standing by the side of the gate, and as soon as anyone enters, they'll naturally investigate. Of course, they didn't dare to try this with the elders and Grand elders from the Pyrmont faction, targeting only the youngsters. They didn't expect any of them would be able to sense them, and it was only after they've already attempted it did they notice this. When the duo saw Gray's gaze, they had shocked expressions on their faces and hastily withdrew their spiritual senses, while nodding gently to Gray. Gray's gaze didn't hold any ill intent. He didn't even care if these guys were sizing them up. The truth was, with how powerful his spiritual senses was, he had been keeping tabs of everything within 100 meters radius of himself, so even before these guys sensed him, he had sensed their presence. There were multiple 7th stage sovereign senses locked on him, and he could also sense a large number of 8th stage sovereigns. There's no way to accurately confirm the exact cultivation stages of an elementalist from just the strength of their spiritual senses, but most elementalists barely worry about training their mental strength, leaving only a few which are mostly necromancers and inscribers or arraymasters. Given the small number of people who could increase their mental strength through other means, predicting the estimated cultivation stages of an elementalist from just their spiritual senses is quite high. Just the sheer number of people in the 7th and 8th stage took Gray by surprise. He has been to a few top factions and families, and he wasn't sure there was this number of sovereigns present there, much less having so many in the late stages. These ancient factions can't be messed with. He thought inside. There were a few senses he didn't try to investigate, not that he couldn't, but he could tell that these were senses of people in the 9th stage of the Sovereign Plane at least, and he didn't want to offend any one of these people. The group were taken into the faction grounds, and straight for the Pyro faction main hall. The Pyro faction leader and some of the elders were waiting there for the group. Inside the hall, on the end of the hall, a set of seats could be seen. The one in the middle being made from gold, different from the others, which clearly represented that of the leader, and then 3 silver chairs on either side of the golden seat. Each seat was occupied by people who were all dressed in red robes. There were 4 ladies, 3 middle-aged, and one who looked to be in her mid-20s. The remaining 3 were old men, each sporting white hair and beards. The old man sitting in the golden chair stood up after the group entered the hall. Devereux, I see you have taken the next step. Lord Dante, the other grand elder that came with the group, bowed softly to the old man who stood up from the golden chair. Gray observed the place, staring at everyone present before them, and he felt his heart race a bit when he tried to sense their cultivation stages. Without a doubt, he knew for sure that all 7 people before him were half-god plane elementalists. Adding the 2 elders, and the other elder he sensed outside, that's already 10 half-god plane elementalists. Gray knew there were still a few hidden in the faction. He sucked in a deep breath at the show of strength from this ancient faction. A single faction having 10 half-god elementalists in the Aurora continent would be regarded as one of the strongest, if not even the strongest. Thinking of the possibilities of all ancient factions having such strength, he couldn't help but wonder how things were in the ancient times. Bertram, the old man referred to as Lord Dante, turned to faction leader Bertram. Lord Dante, it's an honor to be in your presence. Faction leader Bertram bowed, accompanied by the rest of the group, including Grand Elder Archibald and Grand Elder Devereux. Lord Dante glanced through the group, and his eyes shone when he laid them on Gray. A soft smile appeared on his face as he said, "Sit. I'll go straight to the point since there's no time to delay. I would like for some of the youths from my faction to train in the Pyro faction. Faction leader Bertram told Lord Dante the purpose of their visit. Bertram continued, with the current situation of the world, we have to increase our overall strength, and I hope that you will be willing to extend a helping hand to our members. It's only natural to help a friend, especially when it involves our survival as well. There's no issue with bringing your youngsters. Lord Dante readily agreed. He added, I can see that you brought some bright sparks with you today. Yes, Lord Dante. Faction leader Bertram replied. He paused and asked, I believe you've heard of Lucas Dawson? Isn't he the boy who became one of the youngest half-gods a few years back? Lord Dante gave a questioning look. He wasn't too interested in people who weren't long-time half-god plane elementalists, and there were very few new half-gods that could interest him. He heard the news of a young genius who shocked the outside world a few years ago. To someone like Lord Dante, anything within 1,000 years is regarded as a few years back. Yes, that person. Faction leader Bertram knew what Lord Dante was asking and confirmed, this is his son. Lord Dante's eyes trailed back to Gray as he let out an, oh. Chapter 1699. Feeling the pressure? Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 1699. Feeling the pressure? Gray didn't expect faction leader Bertram to speak about his father, but he didn't think too much about it. His father was a famous figure in the Aurora continent, and rightfully so given his cultivation stage and his strength. Ezekiel and the others suddenly thought they figured out why Gray was acting in the way he was. His father was a half-god expert who seems to be regarded as the brightest genius over the past 100 years. Having such a figure as a father will naturally make one feel pride over the rest. Even most of these geniuses in these ancient factions don't have a half-god plane elementalist as their father. Seeing the gaze of Lord Dante on him, Gray bowed, offering his respect. Since you guys are here, it actually happens to be the time of the year when our rankings are decided in the faction. The higher your rank, the better the spot you'll get for your cultivation in the vein. Lord Dante said, giving Ezekiel the look for him to continue with the explanation. In the Pyro faction, strength is the #1 ruling factor. And to acquire more strength, you have to always have a good cultivation spot in the vein. According to Ezekiel, every 10 years, the youths are tested, and their performances will determine where they will be able to use for their cultivation for the next 10 years. Of course, the cultivation stage of each individual is taken into account to maximize the benefits, as well as the cultivation talent of these youths. If one is more than 100 years old, they aren't regarded as young talents anymore, and they can no longer compete for any position below the first stages of the sovereign plane. According to the rules of the Pyro faction, an elementalist must get through the first 3 stages of the sovereign plane before they clock 100 years old, or else the faction will stop all its help in assisting said individual. Anyone above 50 years of age isn't allowed to participate in any event below the sovereign plane. This method has helped the Pyro faction grow multiple geniuses over millennials without any issues. Gray didn't have any problems with their rules. He's nowhere near 50, and is already on his way to the late stages of the sovereign plane, so he was safe. A few of the youths from the Piermont faction didn't feel comfortable, as there were some who were very close to the 50-year benchmark, and they were still just entering the late stages of the venerable plane. It couldn't be helped, the Piermont faction only recently started recruiting some high-caliber geniuses after Gray's fame spread across the continent, and it has only been a few years. After listening to Ezekiel's explanation, the group got the general overview of what was happening. It's basically a ranking competition and anyone could participate, just within your cultivation stages. Is there anything else that can be gained other than having a good cultivation spot? Gray inquired, not that he wasn't curious about this cultivation spot or anything, it's just that if only increasing his cultivation is all he wanted, he wasn't too interested in staying in one place for an extended period to do that. Breaking through to the 7th stage will only take him some time, but he will be able to achieve it anyway, so there was no point in feeling this place was extra special. Those in the top 10 are rewarded with an item or cultivation technique from the faction's reserves. Ezekiel mentioned, oh, that's interesting. Gray's interest was piqued. You should take them there now since there's nothing else to do here. Lord Dante suggested, before adding, we were waiting for your group before we head there ourselves. Faction leader Bertram ordered the youngsters to follow Ezekiel and his group, while the others followed Lord Dante and the elders. The Grand Elders and Elders weren't part of the younger generation, so they naturally had no reason to participate or follow them there. Gray and the others followed behind Ezekiel quietly, with Gray's eyes always staying sharp as he made sure to catch everything that passes his view. This was the first time he was visiting an ancient faction that had people living in it. The group walked through the faction grounds before getting to the arena, which was already abuzz from the noise of the crowd cheering. Seeing the large Colosseum-like place, a few of the youths from the Pyrmont faction could feel their hearts racing. This isn't compared to what they've been doing in the Aurora continent. This was a chance for them to increase their cultivation, and not just that, but also prove to these people that even though they were an ancient faction, they weren't different from them. But seeing Ezekiel and his group, they couldn't help but ask themselves if they truly were on the same level. Looking at things from this perspective, all their gazes landed on a particular silhouette, and that was Gray. In their group, he's probably the only one who can easily leave this place with a performance that will shock this entire ancient faction. Will he be able to produce another miracle like before? Some of those who had traveled with Gray during the battle with the Syphilis faction knew all about Gray's performance, and how completely different he was when it came to these battles. They knew he didn't go all out against Elder Benedict, as they've seen how crazy Gray could get once his hands were forced, and Elder Benedict unfortunately couldn't achieve that. Thinking about all of Gray's feats, they suddenly stopped thinking about how they would perform, and all focused on just his performance alone. If Gray could get a breathtaking performance like he has always put up, then there's a high chance that this place will be rocked by the end of this event. Gray didn't know all eyes were on him, nor did he feel the weight of the faction's prestige resting on his shoulders. The truth was, not just the faction, but the view these people had on the entire outside world can be changed by his performance here today. If he agrees to fight, that is. Chapter 1700. Pyrmont faction being looked down on. Yeah, send him out already. Why continue to beat him in this manner when you know that he's not on your level? Why are you acting like this is your first time seeing Senior Merrick battle someone? It's because it's her brother getting beat up. Ha ha ha. The entire arena was filled with multiple conversations as people watched the battles take place. There were conflicting feelings from those supporting both opponents. Gray and the others didn't attract any attention since they weren't anything special there. Anywhere else in the outside world, Gray would have drawn a lot of attention given his age and cultivation stage, but in an ancient faction like the Pyro faction, he was just one of the few hundred people in the 6th stage of the Sovereign Plane below the age of 50. Gray sat down and watched the ongoing battle taking place. This was a round where anyone could be challenged, right before the main competition. This round is more like a way to start an event, and in a faction of this size, there were definitely people who had some misunderstandings and would like to settle it. Some would spar a while before the competition, while others would spar at the start of the competition, hoping to get the attention of one of the elders in the half-god plane. This was the goal of almost all the participants, to try to get the recognition of a top elder and gain more benefits. The current battle taking place is between two mid-stage sovereigns. One was in the 4th stage, while the other was in the 5th stage. The one in the 5th stage naturally had the advantage in this battle, however, he was refusing to end the battle even when he had completely overpowered his opponent. His opponent has refused to surrender, which can't be said to be his fault, so he didn't stop dishing out more suffering until his opponent decides to give up. None of his attacks were aimed at claiming the young man's life, but he didn't hold back, and could possibly leave the young man bedridden for a few months. Ezekiel leaned close to Gray and asked, "Would you like to try your hand against him?" Gray gave him a glance and shook his head with little to no interest. No. His short reply made Ezekiel a bit annoyed, but he didn't say anything else. Even if your father is a half-god plane expert, he'll have to bow his head here, much less someone like you. He thought internally with a disapproving grunt. The battle taking place didn't last long as it ended in a few more seconds. The opponent of the person called Senior Merrick could barely fight back, so it was normal that the battle didn't last long. After that group left, a few more people jumped on stage to challenge other people. Time went by in a blink, and before they knew it, it was high noon. When the group came here, it was still morning, but now, they were clearly getting close to the middle of the day, and the fight was getting more heated. The arena hasn't lost a single buzz since they came, with the crowd still as animated as ever. The news of Gray's group coming from the outside world has spread across the arena, and a few people have even challenged some people from the Pyrmont faction. Of 8 people who have been challenged, only one of them has managed to achieve a win. The rest have not only been defeated, but they were completely suppressed. They couldn't even put up a proper fight. Keith won against someone in his cultivation stage, but it was just barely. He's not a genius on the level of Gray nor his friends, but he is still someone who could be called a genius. Against most people in the same cultivation stage as himself, he's confident that he would win. Before meeting Gray, he didn't know if he would have had this confidence here, but since he encountered Gray, things have turned out great for him, and he has even started to improve rapidly. He quickly gained the attention of the people present in the arena, being the only one to win from the outside world. Even though his opponent couldn't be called the top genius here, his opponent was still a genius nonetheless, although younger. A few more minutes went by and a 6th stage sovereign jumped on the platform, his gaze on the area where those from the Pyrmont faction were seated. I heard that we have visitors from the outside world, and it will only be right if we have a sparring session to see just how powerful those from the outside world are. Since you're the only one who isn't an elder that's in the 6th stage of the sovereign plane, I would like to challenge you, before the start of the competition. The figure who jumped on stage spoke clearly, a hint of mockery in his voice. The seat of the youths from the outside world isn't the only information that has gone out, even the seats of those elders who were seated on a higher position was revealed, and the cultivation stages of most of the elders there proved to these geniuses of the pyro world that they were superior to these people. On the stands, when the elders from the Pyrmont faction heard this, there was a visible change in their expressions, but none of them reacted, they all looked in Gray's direction. Not just them, but all eyes were on Gray, who was seated. He was the only one above the early stages in the group of youths from the outside world, so they naturally knew he was the one the young man was talking to. One of the top 100 geniuses in the faction. I didn't expect that he would be the one to challenge him. Hehe, Senior Zayden is showing them too much respect. Shush, don't underestimate the people from the outside world. They're not on our level, and you know this.